It was an ordinary clear day at one of the city's construction sites. Work was in full swing. One of the workers, a young dark-haired man named Tony, received a message on his phone. It said that he again did not pass the selection process in one of the companies. As it turned out, he had competence in the right direction, but they had restrictions on hiring employees, so he could not pass the interview. At that moment, someone called out to Tony, forcing him to close his phone. As it turned out, it was his partner John, who asked if Tony was playing mobile games again instead of working. Tony hastened to hide his phone and pretend to be harmless, saying that he had already finished his work and now had nothing better to do. John incredulously asked him why a guy who had only been on the team for a year was doing so well, but she didn't answer him that she had been doing this since he left school. He had talked about it when they were sitting at the bar. He grinned, saying that John loses his memory every time after every drink. The man was not very happy with this answer. Then Tony climbed onto the stepladder and began painting the walls, saying that John could rest and smoke, and he would finish everything for now. At that moment, Tony's body was pierced by a terrible, strange sensation. John noticed this and asked what happened to him. Tony immediately grabbed his back but said that he was fine. But despite this, his whole body continued to shake. He thought to himself that his painkillers were most likely wearing off. As it turned out, due to hard work, his back began to hurt very badly. The pain became more frequent after he lifted the panel 6 months ago. After some time, evening came, the men left the construction site, and at that moment one of the elders, Stephen, approached them. He asked why Tony was doing all the work here. He turned to John. The man was extremely dissatisfied with the fact that his partner, Tony, was doing all the work for him. Then John asked the boss why he liked Tony so much. The man said that he is the only one who tries to complete everything on time, which is why he likes him, while John does not listen to him at all. Then the boss approached Tony and asked how his back was. The guy said that he was fine and thanked the man for his concern. Stephen asked if he was taking on a lot of responsibilities, to which Tony hesitated a little and said that apparently he really took on too much work. He then asked him if he wanted to go for a drink with them, but the guy replied that he needed to go to the hospital because his painkillers had run out. Then Stephen said goodbye to him and wished him a good trip. Soon after, Tony got into a taxi and went about his business. While he was driving in the car, he thought about his life. He thought that he would not be able to work until he took the pills. He would like to find a less stressful position in which he could feel physically good. However, even after a bunch of applications, none of the companies accepted him. After some time, Tony arrived at the hospital, where he continued to think about why he was so unlucky. He thought about the fact that he was not accepted because he only applied for administrative positions. He was afraid that because of his back, he would no longer be able to bear heavy loads. Soon the doctor, whose name was Hank, received him. As soon as he touched his back, Tony yelped in pain and tears flowed from his eyes. The man said that the intervertebral disc between the fourth and fifth vertebrae had worn out and Tony could no longer lift weights. The guy did not object, saying that without work he would simply die of hunger. But the doctor said that he had already told him about this many times. He asked if Tony really wanted to repeat his father's fate. Then, before the guy's eyes, terrible memories were brought back again. 13 years ago, during a change in settings, his father died in an accident. That day, his father was working at height and suddenly fell. The company shifted the blame to the contractor, and its president suddenly disappeared. Thanks to lawyers, they were able to receive compensation of 25 million won, and since then their family has been in a state of survival. Stephen asked him what he would do if his mother found out about everything, and asked Tony to think again, because painkillers are a temporary effect, and his spine is not eternal. The young man said that it was very difficult for him to find a position with the same high salary. The doctor said that in this case he had nothing more to add. Then he suddenly shouted at him, saying that if he was going to continue like this, he might as well not come to him anymore. He asked the nurse to take him out and said that with this attitude, he was no longer going to have him in his office. When Tony left the office, Hank took his phone and opened the bank application in it, and then transferred 2 million won to a certain woman named Hannah. He then leaned back in his chair, sighed, and thought to himself that Hannah's life had gone downhill since she met her husband. Tony soon arrived at another hospital, where his mother, Hannah, was lying in one of the rooms. He sat down next to her bed, thinking to himself that he was a real idiot. He then asked the woman if it was painful for her to undergo all these procedures. Hannah said that she was fine, she didn't want her son to worry, and then she asked him if he had sent her money recently, adding that she was fine and didn't need that amount of money. When Tony asked her about what money, she showed him the screen of her phone, which showed an incoming transfer of 2 million won. The guy didn't know what to answer. He didn't understand who made this translation. He suspected that it could be the construction manager, the foreman, or Uncle Hank. Then Hannah asked her son how he was doing at the company, To which the guy replied that it was not difficult for him at all. He was doing well, even though he had only finished school. The woman sighed, saying that she was very sorry that her son was having a hard time, and she could not even support him because of her illness. Then Tony suggested that she sleep, seeing that she was already quite tired, to which Hannah replied that lately she really gets tired very quickly, but now her son was next to her, and there was no way she could just go to sleep. Tony said he would be there for her and she could rest. Then he took her hand, and then the woman agreed to sleep a little. After some time, she discovered that Tony had fallen asleep on the bench next to her bed. She then stood up from her bunk and covered him with her blanket. She thought to herself that her son was completely stupid. He had the same smell that his father had when he was still alive. It was the smell characteristic of a man working on a construction site, so she couldn't help but notice what he had been doing all this time. She promised herself that she would definitely cope with the disease and would help her son, who now, unfortunately, was trying to do everything alone, for which she was immensely grateful to him. Soon, a new day dawned, and Tony returned to the construction site. Some of the workers were already sitting in one of the workrooms. The gray-haired man, who was one of the bosses, noticed two guys approaching the building. It was Tony and John. The hero greeted Kevin, his boss, and he asked what happened to John had he not washed himself. The man said that he drank a little yesterday. Then Kevin told him to start work as soon as he cleaned himself up. He said that if they see Elsung Group employees today, they should avoid them. He then turned to Tony and asked him to bring him a cup of coffee with 1 spoon of sugar. When they sat down at the table, he asked the guy how he was feeling. He replied that everything was the same, but he was getting worse. Then Kevin asked him if he wanted to become a carpenter. They really missed them. He said that in this case, instead of 110,000 won, he would receive 150,000 won. Tony replied that he didn't mind, but he was afraid his back wouldn't hold up. Kevin praised him, said that he would finish his job and really appreciated this quality in him. Tony thought about the fact that the money obviously didn't come from the boss. Then he thought about how hard it was for him to work. But he knew what he was doing, walking around and causing him pain and inconvenience. And now some unknown person has appeared who sends his mother money. Then he decided to call Uncle Hank. He thanked him for his help, saying that he guessed that it was he who sent his mother the money. He said that he would definitely repay him for his kindness, and then Stephen asked if he really never left the construction site. When the doctor realized that the guy was still working there, he screamed at him, telling him to finally listen to him and quit there. After that, he hung up, and at that moment, pain pierced Tony's back again. The guy was upset that his uncle was constantly lecturing him. At that moment, a strange message appeared on his phone. He was extremely surprised by what he saw there. It was exactly what he expected after 200 refusals. The message said that Elsung was congratulating Tony for making it to the second round of interviews, and they were expecting him at the office in a few days. At that moment, some strange blue screen appeared in front of the young man. When he looked up, he saw that a strange inscription was written on the screen, which said that his wish had come true. The hero did not understand how to react to all this. He extended his fingers to the screen, but his hand simply passed through it. The guy did not understand why the screen did not disappear, and why he could see something like this. He suspected that he was starting to go crazy. Then suddenly the system informed him that he had joined the Elsung employee course and asked him if he wanted to start training. At that moment, he approached one of the workers and asked him for one favor. The man thought that he just wanted to ask him for a cigarette. He pointed ahead of him and asked if he could see the sign hovering above him. Then the man suddenly screamed, asking if he had really gone crazy or had just had time to drink somewhere in the morning. Tony hurried to apologize to him and leave. Why did he run inside the building? He realized that no one could see this thing. He understood why that man reacted that way, because he too would be taken aback if they talked to him about this, because he is really the only one who can see this nonsense. Then he went into the restroom and stood in front of the mirror. The screen was also not visible in the reflection, but it still hung over him. Tony thought that this was complete madness. He assumed that he was just dreaming it all. He wanted to get into this company, but this strange training was something incomprehensible. He saw this in TV series, but it was still difficult for him to accept what was happening to him, all this. But becoming part of a large company was his dream. Then he decided that he would undergo this training, no matter what it cost him. The system told him that if he gave up halfway through, he would lose his memories of the course. But Tony was determined. He said he was willing to take the risk, and then the system told him that he would get a job as a reward and gave him the skill, which was called the potential employee perspective. When Tony walked away from the mirror, he realized that everything was swimming before his eyes. While he was trying to come to his senses, the system informed him that the skill assessing skills and performance could identify possible problems with long-term use. A debuff called unfitness appeared, so Tony should only use this skill when necessary. After some time, the hero went to the bookstore, still thinking that he did not understand how such a skill could affect the environment. Then he decided that by using this ability, he would be able to see something, and after that he approached the stand with books. He closed his eyes, psyching himself up to use the skill, and soon decided to try it. He opened his eyes, mentally trying to activate the potential employee's gaze. However, the longer he looked at the books, the more clearly he realized that nothing special was happening. Soon the system appeared in front of him again. She said that this skill was only available in the buildings of the Elsung Group company. Then he cried out loud, saying that this system had too many requirements. He ended up buying a bunch of books from this store. However, before unpacking them, he went to a construction site to test his skills. When he opened it, he saw that in 2 of the 12 books, some paragraphs glowed with a bright green light. He returned the rest of the books back to the store, and those books that had notes in them he read all night long. Soon the day of the interview arrived, and Tony opened his closet to find clothes suitable for the day. The system told him that a neat, classic suit would be his best choice. The hero was shaking, but he understood that the main thing in such a situation was not to be nervous. Soon he went outside. It was a pleasant, sunny day outside. The hero sat down at the bus stop and continued reading the book that had notes. He continued reading it even while on the bus. Although the constant pop-up messages irritated him, on the other hand, he realized that they were not very helpful to him. Soon, one of the company's employees told him that the interview room was on the 2nd floor. However, Tony suddenly heard company workers behind him, a man and a woman, quietly talking to each other. The woman told him that this guy has 90/80/61, which is an excellent score. The system informed him that he had passed the appearance assessment. Tony sighed resignedly, saying that the general information about the interview stated that appearance does not matter. Elsung Group gave full freedom to applicants, but at the same time carefully assessed their every step. The company occupied a significant position in each of the areas, including fashion, logistics, real estate, tourism, etc. It was intimidating in its scale. Soon Tony and the rest of the candidates went to the interview room, where they took their place and had to take the test. Many of those present were very nervous, not knowing how to answer the questions. There is a big difference between those who know the answers to questions and those who don't. At least that's where Tony had an advantage. Soon, men and women entered the office. The girl introduced herself as Kimberly, saying that she joined the company in 2017, and today she would evaluate skills. The man's name was Connor. He said that he had been working in the company since 2014 and would help candidates with testing. They knew that some of the candidates had come from afar, so they asked if anyone had any inconvenience on the way to the interview. Then one of the candidates raised her hand. She wanted to ask something. She said that she came from a long distance and then added that, in many companies, all travel expenses are covered by the employer, so she would like to know if their company pays for the trip. Tony didn't think to himself that no company would want to hire a candidate with such an attitude. The next moment, the system informed them that the girl, who was a potential employee, had been eliminated. He then realized that he needed to keep writing down the results, but he wondered that the test had 200 questions, and he was wondering if he had to solve everything or if he should make a couple of mistakes. Half an hour was allotted for 200 questions, and soon Tony realized that he had a minute left. He decided that he did not have to do the test completely. He did not know who gave him this ability, but he decided that it would be a sin not to use it. He must do everything in his power. When the test was over, he went to one of the establishments to meet his colleagues from the construction site. Then Stephen asked him why he did not come to work yesterday. Since Tony never missed a day of work, Stephen assumed that he had a girlfriend, so he suggested that he take her somewhere decent. Tony apologized and thought to himself that if he said that he went to an interview with a large company, then he would be considered a rat. Stephen laughed, saying that he was just a young guy, and then added that he now understands where he spends all his earned money. Tony didn't think about the fact that he became very friendly with the foreman and the others, and if it weren't for his back, he would have continued to work there. At that moment, a blue screen appeared in front of him again. The system recommended that he be prepared for the outcome of the interview. The system said that there was a feature of the task related to the interview. The general task required him to prepare for the final interview. An interview awaited him, during which he would need to answer the director's questions. Tony was a little angry. He couldn't believe that the system was inviting him to meet with the director himself, but the punishment for not showing up was a change of construction site. Stephen was distracted from his dinner by the sound of his cell phone. As it turned out, his boss, Kevin, called him. He asked him to arrange a meeting for him and Tony. Stephen said he would send a guy to him right away. He then turned to Tony, saying that the boss wanted to talk to him. He smiled as he asked what was wrong, as Tony didn't look surprised at all. Tony sighed, saying that his boss was paying him, so there was no point in avoiding him. Then he left the establishment, realizing that he needed to go forward and talk to the boss. Soon Tony arrived at the construction site. The atmosphere between him and Kevin was quite tense. The man then said that he tried his best, and that's why tomorrow Tony will work as a carpenter for the senior foreman. The hero asked him why he made such a sudden decision. Then Kevin shouted, asking where else he could find someone like Tony. He asked him what he would do without the carpenter. Then the hero replied that he was fine with everything. Kevin said he would find someone who could paint the walls, but finding a carpenter was not so easy. He couldn't lose someone like Tony. The hero was very bothered by the fact that the boss shouted at him for so long, it was impossible to talk. At that moment, the system informed him that he had a side quest open. He needed to listen to the boss's story to the end, since the boss considers him a good person. The hero was not very happy with this task, but he had no choice. He turned to Kevin, asking him to be a little quieter. He said that he would listen to him, and then he himself would have to tell his boss something. Kevin then said that now that he didn't have a second carpenter, he couldn't complete the construction plan. Because of this, he loses millions of won a day. Then he screamed again, saying Tony couldn't leave. The hero thought he only assumed, but in his opinion, this is 100% his fault. He decided that he had to retreat, so Kevin asked him to help him for at least a week. Tony didn't really want to agree, but decided that he would help him, but only for a week. Kevin was immediately happy and thanked him, saying that he was trying to take care of him. He thanked the guy for coming to him. Then he said that this was the only time he had asked him for something like that. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and called the president, saying that everything had been decided and he would be able to complete the plan in a week. Within 7 days, they would finish construction. Soon evening came, and the workers asked the boss how everything went. Then he said that everything was fine. Soon, 2 men approached Tony. One of them was his boss, Steven, and a man he didn't know stood next to him. Steven asked him to come down, telling him to say hello to the director of the Elsung group. Tony did not come down from the stepladder and shook the man's hand, saying that this was their first meeting. The director said that his name was Charlie. He began to worry when he learned that the construction plan was in jeopardy, and once again thanked Tony for his help. And although the hero grinned, saying that he was glad to help, he thought to himself that he was only here for a week, since his back was already starting to fail. Then Charlie said that the day after tomorrow he was going to the office, and since it was his last time here, he offered the men a drink. However, Tony looked away in embarrassment, saying that he couldn't go because he had an appointment for tomorrow. After work, he went back to the hospital to see Uncle Hank. As soon as he went into the office, everyone else who was in the hospital heard a terrifying scream. The doctor tried to fix his back, but the situation was already so dire that any of his touch was accompanied by incredible pain for Tony. Then he told him to go to the second floor for physical therapy. The pain brought tears to Tony's eyes. He was very worried that he had an interview coming up, and the doctor continued to reproach him for not caring about his health at all. The next day, Tony finally came to the Elsung group for an interview. He, along with 2 other candidates, appeared before the directors. The hero introduced himself, saying that his name was Tony. When he looked up, he saw a familiar man in front of him. It was Charlie, the same director of the company he had met last night. Charlie grinned, saying that this was not the first time they had met, and therefore the guy could sit down. When all the candidates took their seats, the directors decided to proceed with the interviews. Charlie expressed his desire to start first, and the rest of those present supported him. Then he turned to the man, one of the candidates, and asked him to stand up. He noticed how the man was dressed. He was wearing white socks with black trousers. Then he asked him what he thought about his appearance. The candidate replied that it seemed that these clothes did not go well together. Tony wondered if the system had warned him that there would be high blood pressure at this stage. Then Charlie asked him why he wore these clothes anyway, since he himself thought that they didn't look very good. Tony knew there was an atmosphere in the room right now that made the candidates very uncomfortable. Such an atmosphere brings out all their hidden traits. The candidate could not answer Charlie's question. Then the man asked him why he was silent. Could he really not control his emotions? Tony understood that first of all, in such a situation, you need to calm down. In this interview, restraint and the ability to control emotions are tested, so you need to come to terms. Seeing the confusion on the candidate's face, Charlie sighed in displeasure. The man was too stressed. He could not squeeze out a word. He is unable to handle such a situation, and when everyone realized this, Charlie asked him to sit down and began interviewing the next candidate. It soon became clear that the girl had no experience in social work, and although she tried to justify herself by saying that she had been studying all this time, Charlie said that this was not what their company needed. When he asked her how she was going to work with clients, Tears appeared in her eyes. The girl did not know what to answer. Soon the girl's interview also ended. She left the room, all in tears. Tony realized that Principal Charlie had asked the question first to throw everyone off guard, because the rest of the questions required mental preparation. Soon it was Tony's turn. He stood up from his chair and proudly introduced himself. The hero was not going to leave here with nothing. Then Charlie asked him what his education was. The hero replied that he was an expert in banking, but Charlie knew that he had not studied at the university. Tony said he didn't really get a college education. Charlie then asked him if there was anything else he wanted to say. The hero thought that if he blurted out something wrong, he would be removed from the list of candidates, so he decided to be honest. He knew he had to pique their interest, so he said he needed to make money. Charlie said they were doing the same thing and he came here for the same reason, but he asked why he decided to choose a job instead of going to university. Tony said he doesn't regret his decision one bit. Instead of studying, he went to work at a construction site, and in the evenings he spent all his free time on self-education. He said he never neglected it. He may not have gone to college like everyone else, but with the help of online courses, he qualified as a technician. He tried to compensate for the absence of university in every way, and the result was that he was able to obtain an education in the economic field. Charlie was very surprised by this answer. He turned to look at his colleagues and smiled, saying it was wonderful. Thus, his part of the interview was over and he turned the floor over to his colleagues. The man asked the hero what he could do for their company. Tony knew that this was a difficult question for the average person, but he was ready for it. The reason he wants to work here is that the work is not too stressful and the money is good enough. This way he can pay his mom's hospital bills and not have to worry about what he eats or his health. He will be free. Then he said that as long as it does not contradict the laws and norms of society, he is ready for anything. Then the man asked him why he put forward such conditions. Tony said that otherwise the image and future of the company that gives him orders will be destroyed. He supports the integrity of the company and its contribution to the development of the country. Only if these conditions are met will Elsung Group move in the right direction in accordance with its goals. The hero understood that this was not a perfect answer. He just had to convince them that there was no such thing as a perfect answer, because this interview was aimed at seeing how people behave in stressful situations. Then the man decided to ask him the next question, asking if he had a girlfriend. Tony said that he doesn't have a girlfriend, and it just so happens that there are practically no women around him. He said that if a man has someone suitable, then he will be happy to meet this girl, to which Charlie laughed. Then he reported that Tony did an excellent job in the interview. He said the interview was over and all candidates could go. Soon evening came and Tony returned to the construction site. Stephen approached him, surprised that the guy had come here. He waved at him and said that he had a lot to do in the control room today. He noticed that Tony looked a little strange, so he asked him what was wrong. The hero wanted to tell him what was really happening. But at that moment, their conversation was interrupted by a strange sound. As it turned out, John decided to approach them, but he tripped over a beam and fell. The hero wondered if John was in trouble again, but he had too much work to worry about. Then Stephen said that they were having dinner together today and invited Tony to go with them. However, the hero said that he would like to talk to the boss. Stephen, like everyone else, was wondering what they wanted to say to Tony. Then the guy said that he was finishing his last week here, which greatly surprised the men. At that moment, the system sent him a new task. He needed to attend the evening and listen to stories. There was no reward or penalty for refusal, which was extremely surprising for system orders. Then Tony asked the boss what was for dinner. Stephen grinned, saying that today they would have soup. Then Tony said that if the boss fed him beef, he would go over to the boss's side. John and his partner were very pleased that Tony had made such a decision. Moreover, they also wanted to try the meat. Stephen tried to look dissatisfied, saying that he would agree to this only because everyone was asking. Soon the men arrived at the establishment and decided to drink to such a good day. Stephen said this week has been very difficult. Lately, people want to become engineers less and less. His brother is a gas worker, and he himself worked in his specialty for 20 years. He didn't understand what was the point of studying if it was so difficult to make good money, so he decided not to study further, believing that it was useless. John said that this is all for a reason. The manager says this because he is already too old. At this moment, Tony thought about the fact that, even when drunk, he was not talking nonsense, and the technical staff had a very difficult time with this. Currently, industry is driven by science, technology, and pharmaceuticals. When everyone was so drunk that they could not think clearly, the hero turned to the window and began to look at the city at night. A whole week has passed since that evening. Tony was at Elsung Group when suddenly his boss called him and asked why he didn't show up for work. Tony then said that he had talked yesterday about taking the day off because he needed rest. However, Stephen insisted. He asked Tony to come to work because he had been up all night and did not want to work alone. However, Tony said that he couldn't go out and wouldn't come in tomorrow, and before the manager could respond, he hung up. At that moment, one of the company employees approached him and said that she would take him to the place of debate. She said that the second interview is a discussion of 10 people. Tony can enter into the discussion according to the speaker's words. The topic of the group discussion is OECD countries, where South Korea is part of the Commonwealth Economic Development Organization. Today, they will discuss the issue of high prices for education and ways to solve this problem. When all the candidates arrived in the room, the presenter said that when answering, they should raise their hand, say the number and name, and only then speak. Tony then realized that this was exactly what he had been worried about, as this topic required a wide range of social work experience. He mentally thanked the group leader for the invaluable experience. Soon, the man who was leading the debate made notes on his tablet and said that they should begin. Tony raised his head up confidently, preparing for the group interview. He was assigned number 2. The discussion soon began, and number 3 joined the debate and raised his hand, saying that he believed that the economic situation of recent years had had a serious impact on the country. As a result of this, the prices of education have increased greatly, and in order to be among the top 10 economically strongest countries, they do not have to skimp on human resources. If the prices of education come down, they will be able to provide more talented people. Tony looked at him in surprise, thinking that this guy was a real idiot. All the discussions had already been given a topic about the reasons for the increase in tuition costs and ways to solve this problem. But this guy simply repeated the question and did not provide any answer. He thought it was good that he decided not to answer first, since now he had time to think about his answer. Soon, the discussion turned to participant number 7. The girl said that her parents spent $300 million to provide her with a good education. Such amounts lead to a decrease in the birth rate, because not every parent is able to spend that much on several children, and she believed that it was necessary to encourage increased demographics and increase payments to families with children. Number 3 agreed with her, saying that families are breaking up, birth rates are falling, tuition costs are rising every year, and encouraging more births is a great solution. Tony thought that this sounded good, but the company had nothing to do with it, because it was not a government enterprise, so they did not need to worry about such issues. Then he raised his hand, offering to consider the situation from the other side. With this statement, he extremely surprised speakers number 3 and 7. Tony said their country ranks first in the world in the cost of education and second in the number of applicants. Then he got up from his seat and went to the board, saying that they should talk about the quality of education. He asked everyone present to look at the education ranking of OECD countries. The quality of the education system ranks 75th. From a young age, they have the choice to continue their education after school or not. Compared to Germany, where education is compulsory, they have the right to choose where to go to study, be it college, university, or self-education. As a result, the number of jobs fully matches the demand, and although the average salary there is higher than in Korea, the difference in income in different specialties is not so great. However, in their country, there is a personnel imbalance. Support for such areas as science, IT, and other technologies is insufficient. In particular, the majority of engineering positions are occupied by foreign workers. Tony believed that if their education system became more streamlined, like in Germany, it would bring benefits. It would reduce the cost of education in the country and help its development as a whole. When he looked at the other debaters, saw the doubt in their eyes, he realized that they were confused by the way he connected these facts. Then participant number 10 asked if he really thought so. It seemed to him that participant number 2 was dissatisfied with their country's education system. Tony was extremely surprised by this statement on his part. He did not expect that there would be open attacks here, but he understood that the main thing in such situations is not to panic. Then he apologized if he had offended anyone, saying that his goal was not to slander their country. Participant number 10 said that he really did not like his words. The foreign education system does not take into account the traditions of their country, and he believes that introducing something like this is a huge mistake. They have enough outstanding and talented people. Everyone here was educated in Seoul or abroad, and they were sitting here only because of their knowledge. But he didn't understand why number 2 thought they were worse than the Germans. Then the debate leader turned to participant number 10 and asked his name. The man replied that his name was Ian. Then the manager thanked him for his participation, saying that he could be free. When he heard this, his face turned red, either from misunderstanding or from anger. The manager said that he did not think he was suitable for their company, but he thanked him for his good work. Tony thought about the fact that nowadays companies need talent who can integrate into the team, and this Ian belittles others, considering himself superior given the requirements of the company. He is the worst of all who could get caught. There is no point in hiring someone who wants to be in the center, crowding out the rest. After that, Ian left the hall, loudly slamming the door behind him. Then the leader said that they had a second topic dedicated to national pension reform. The debate participants discussed this topic a lot. The hero thought that this would never end. 25 minutes passed, and they still had opposition of opinions that could not be resolved. He wanted all this to end quickly. Judging by the examiner's face, he was also tired of all this. Then Tony decided to speak out, saying that at this rate, they would not be able to come to a consensus. But summing up each speech, two prevailing views could be identified. Participant number 1 said that national and occupational pensions should be integrated, following the example of Japan, and participant number 6 responded that the lack of national pensions could be supplemented by private payments. Then he suggested listening to one more person and summing up the results by voting. The examiner noted to himself that there was a heated discussion going on within the team, but this guy was silent. Usually people like him mediate in disputes, and these are the people their company needs. Soon he thanked all the participants for their work and said that they were done for the day. After everyone left, he made a note next to Tony's name, saying that this guy sure did it. When the hero left the office, he heard someone scream. The man was saying that he had been treated unfairly. When he turned around, he saw that participant number 10 was arguing with the examiner, saying that he was kicked out undeservedly. Then the hero realized that there are even those here who do not admit their mistake. When the hero blinked, he saw that the examiner seemed to be covered in a green aura. Tony didn't understand why his skill was activated. Now each person looked completely different in his eyes. He turned around to look at the other people who were in the corridor. Behind him stood a man and a woman. The woman had an orange aura, and the man had a yellow aura. Today's interview turned out to be useful. He learned something new. Firstly, if you blink 3 times in a row, it is activated automatically. And secondly, each color is characteristic of a certain person. It can be red, orange, or green. He assumed that red were people under 20, orange were people over 20, and green were people over 30, but he doubted they were divided by age. After some time, the hero returned to his job at a construction site. While he was busy working, a new message arrived on his phone. It said that he had an interview with the El Sung Group. The last interview with the directors would take place tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the company's main building. The hero was extremely happy about this news. He was happy that the day of the last interview would finally come, but he understood that vigilance would not hurt him. He decided that he must remain calm and must pass the final interview in order to fulfill his dream. After that, he approached John and decided to give him advice, saying that he was putting too much paint on the roller so it would run out faster. However, the guy did not hear him and again took a huge amount of paint and then sent it upward to paint the walls. When Tony looked up, he saw a huge amount of paint flying towards his face. All this paint ended up on his head. John immediately climbed down from the stepladder, apologizing to his partner. And although Tony was very unhappy, he said that he shouldn't worry about such little things. John continued to change, saying that he was very sorry, but the hero reassured him, saying that he was fine. He then headed towards the showers and met his supervisor, Steven, along the way. The man asked him what happened, to which the hero replied that it was nothing special, just work issues, and said that he would go to the hostel to wash himself. Steven said it was far away, so he should go to the bathhouse on the first floor. It opens today. Tony had no doubts. He was sure how the other workers reacted to this. But Steven said that they themselves said that everyone should come and wash after work today, so there would be no misunderstanding. Then the hero went down the stairs to wash off the paint. It was very comfortable for him to walk around with his hair stuck together. Soon he arrived at the right door. When he walked inside, he immediately took off all his dirty clothes and headed to the shower. After that, he took a hot shower, washing off all the paint. Then he went a little in the middle, where the man was already there. He asked him what he was doing. Tony told him he was a construction worker. The man suggested that this must be very hard work, because he came here from head to toe smeared with paint. Then the hero smiled and asked if this man was really the boss here. When the man told him that he was really in charge, the hero immediately became delighted, saying that his bathhouse was just something. It was a wonderful job, and then asked if he was paid well. The man said that he was paid enough. This was enough not to envy others. Then the hero again thanked him for his work. After this, the man suddenly dived sharply under the water. Tony panicked, thinking that the man suddenly became ill and drowned. He immediately rushed to his aid, intending to pull him out from under the water. At that moment, the man emerged and laughed, asking if he really thought that he was dead. Then he said that he actually had a curse on him. He said that in the bath he always has to press, especially after he has sweated a lot. Tony said that this was very interesting, but he thought to himself that he was doing the right thing. You cannot identify possible inconveniences for clients without testing it yourself. He said that the man was an excellent specialist in his field and looked very healthy, to which the acquaintance told him that he should also take care of his health, not forgetting to exercise and eat well while he was still young. Then he suddenly stood up, saying that it was time for him to go. Tony wished him luck and health, saying he hoped he would do well. The man smiled and said that he also hoped that everything would be fine with the guy. When Tony left the bathhouse, a man in a suit came in after him. He headed straight inside the bathhouse. When he was inside, he called out to the president. As it turned out, he was the same man. He said that the closing ceremony would take place in 40 minutes and asked if he would go to it. As it turned out, President Christopher really had a curse after construction. If he didn't take a bath here, an accident would definitely happen within a year. The man hoped that everything would be fine this year. Soon, the day of the final interview arrived. The hero tried to be as calm and collected as possible. The system told him that all he had to do was pass the final interview, but Tony was unhappy, saying that it was not that easy. When the system said that he should just trust him, he sighed dissatisfiedly, saying that since it was not going to help, he would do everything himself. He needed to remember everything, from the company's past to the events of today. He soon accepted into the company and greeted everyone present, thanking them for giving him a chance. Then the chairman of the commission asked Tony to sit down. The hero thought about the fact that the system told him not to worry, but at a meeting with the directors, luck would not work. Then he decided that it was time to use the skill. When he looked at the directors, he saw that one of them was emitting a blue aura, and the other was violet. They all looked to be over 50 years old. He doubted that they were really directors. Then the only one of the men said that Tony had applied for a leadership position related to credit and banking. The man approached another director, saying that this guy had not studied at any college or university. Then he asked how he was able to educate himself. The man said that this guy must be very good to be able to get this far, and asked the assistant to give him the results of past interviews. Soon all the directors saw that Tony had the highest marks in the interview. They were extremely surprised that he did better than graduates of the most popular universities in the country. Then the assistant leaned over to one of the directors, saying that he thought this guy could be classified as an SSS. This group usually includes relatives and descendants of the chairman's family, or mere mortals who have reached their level. The director then approached Tony, asking what kind of work he would like to do. The hero said that he would prefer an office job, but whatever activity they give him, he will be happy. When the director said that Tony could not go, why, the hero was extremely surprised. Then the director said that the interview was over and thanked the guy for his work. When he came out, they began to discuss whether he could be a relative of the chairman or someone from his circle, and decided to carefully check this information. One of the directors suggested that he was deliberately disguised as an ordinary economist so that they would not suspect anything. Another man agreed with him, saying that the chairman's policy was to start from the very bottom. All this was too suspicious. Since the HR department noticed it first, they should not make mistakes either. They assumed that a person from the SAS group had come to them. The story takes place in an expensive building. A young man came to the office of his father, who was extremely dissatisfied that his son decided to appear after so much time. He said that he failed, although he had been preparing for so long. Such a shame had never happened in their family. The young man said he was very sorry and asked his father to give him another chance. When the man started yelling at him, saying that he didn't show up for the interview and failed, the young man clenched his fists in anger. Then the man again turned to his son named Tony. He told him to speak openly with him and not hide anything. The story shifts again to the construction site. It was just another one of Tony's working days. He again received a message on his phone, saying that he had been hired for a position at the Elsung Group. The hero knew that it would not be easy to pass the interview with the directors, and he had a feeling that it was a waste of time. He then received another message saying that he needed to attend a mandatory medical examination at the regional hospital, but he could also provide medical reports from another hospital. The hero did not know what to do. He wanted to get a job in the company because of his back, but now he doubted that this would not become a hindrance. Then he decided to go to the hospital to see Uncle Hank. When he entered the office, the doctor asked if his back was hurting again. Tony scratched the back of his head and said he was fine today. He said he had a final interview for a position at a large company. Hank was very happy for him, saying that now he would finally not put unnecessary strain on his spine. However, he had a feeling that something was wrong here. Then Tony lowered his head in shame and said that this was nonsense. He understood that he could only ask his uncle about this, but he could not utter a word. Then he said that he wanted him to give him a prescription for painkillers. Hank said that he guessed that the guy came here for this reason. When he looked at him, he realized that Tony looked very sad. This surprised the man, as he usually had a very confident attitude. He didn't understand what the problem was. He remembered Tony's words that he had passed the final interview at a large company. Then the doctor thought that since he was going to get a job, he needed to undergo a medical examination. And then he realized what this guy wanted from him. He understood that if he was caught, he could easily lose his license. However, Hank suddenly started typing something on his computer, thinking that this guy was just like his father, making everyone worry about himself. Soon after, the hero went downstairs to get a prescription from the nurse. And then she gave him something else. As it turned out, it was a disc. At that moment, the hero heard Hank's voice from behind him, who decided to congratulate him again. He said that the guy would pay for his medications as soon as he received his first salary. Tony smiled, realizing that his uncle had helped him a lot. Soon the hero went back home. He received another message from the company, which stated that he had passed the general personnel selection process at Elsung Group. The hero understood that he survived only thanks to the help of his uncle, and this made him feel very good. At that moment, the system window appeared above his head again, informing him that the employee store was available to Tony, and his current balance was equal to 5 points. The system reported that the store is an excellent tool that will help solve problems that arise during work. One can buy special items for points that he will earn by completing tasks. When a window appeared in front of the hero, allowing him to open a store for employees, he immediately agreed. Soon the window of the system increased. Among the goods for new employees, there was a sobering pill that instantly removes alcohol from the body, vision lenses through walls that allow you to see through walls within a radius of 2 meters for 1 minute, a candy that prevents drowsiness when taken for 6 hours. It removes signs of drowsiness, as well as a charming aroma that will make the owner attractive. For the opposite sex, the effect is doubled. Tony couldn't believe his eyes. It seemed to him that it was all a game or some kind of magic. Then the system asked him if he wanted to lose his memory, and the hero hastened to explain that he did not mean that. The system said it was there for him to be successful, and he refused to. So Tony apologized for saying it wrong and asked the system not to take it too seriously. Then the system said that it understood the user's words, but in the third one you need to be more careful, and such a statement made Tony very angry. Why did the system give him a quest in which he needed to talk to his mother, reassure her by telling her that he had found a job in a new company? As a reward, he would receive 6 points, and also open a side quest. As punishment, the side quest would remain closed. The hero thought that even if it weren't for the system, he was still going to go to his mother, which he did in the near future. He came to her room and knocked on the door. When Hannah realized that her son had arrived, she smiled. She said she was feeling better, so her son had nothing to worry about. Then Tony decided to tell her that he had been hired by the Elsung Group. Hannah was very happy, saying that this was great news. Then the guy said that in this case, she needed to get better, and they would go home together. Then Hannah said that today, her aunt bought and brought her a whole box of apples, and she offered to take a few for her son. Tony was delighted to see his mother finally smiling. The woman said that her son studied hard and got a position in a good company, so she was very happy for him. Then Tony stood up and said that he was going to the nurse to get a stroller. He asked his mother to wait for him and went into the corridor. When he left the room, the system informed him that the quest had been completed. She then told him that Hank was very worried about his mother, so Tony should call him and ask him to come to the hospital. He would get 5 points, and there would be no punishment. When the hero saw the name of the quest, which was called First Love, he was shocked. He did not understand what the system wanted to say by this, because Hank was his father's best friend. His father and Uncle Hank were best friends when they were young. He was the same friend who came and scolded his father every time for not taking care of his health. Tony remembered these moments well from his childhood. Now the hero realized that all this time Hank was not married. He still couldn't get over the fact that his father's best friend was in love with his mother. Then he turned to the system, asking if all this was true, to which the system replied that it did not know how to lie. Then the hero asked her why she was giving him this task, and the system replied that it was doing this for the success of a user named Tony. The hero did not understand who was behind this whole system. However, the system responded that such information was not available to him. The hero looked around, not understanding what he should do. Since this task had a time limit, he had about half an hour left. He headed back to his mother's room and stood near the door. When he went inside, his mother asked him where he had been for so long. Tony said that he needed to call. Hannah said that if he was busy, he could go. The son replied that he was fine. Then he decided to ask his mother if she remembered Uncle Hank. Hannah was surprised when her son asked her such a question, and Tony was also surprised by her reaction. His mother's tone made him feel a little strange, perhaps because his father had died. Then he got up and said that he would call, and after that, he would return to her. The hero headed towards the exit from the ward, taking his phone out of his pocket as he went. He then dialed Uncle Hank's number. The doctor had not expected this call. Then the hero decided to ask him directly if he liked his mother. The doctor did not know what to answer. He asked if something had really happened to Hannah. Without waiting for an answer, he immediately jumped up from his seat and asked what hospital they were in now. Tony replied that they were at Seoul General Hospital number 403 and then hung up. At that moment, the system appeared near him again. She said that the hero had made a great choice, but Tony was extremely dissatisfied with how this strange thing behaved. He asked her again what she was, but the system again did not answer. 15 minutes after the call, Uncle Hank showed up at the hospital. He quickly ran down the corridor, not paying attention to anyone, including Tony. He came running here without even taking off his hospital gown. He eventually met Hannah, their first meeting since the death of the hero's father. Soon, the system informed Tony that the quest had been completed, and as a reward, he received 5 points. When the hero calmed down and thought soberly, he came to a conclusion that he considered the only correct one. He looked at the system window and wondered if all this could be true. Then he asked her if his father was really behind this system. The system provided him with one-sided assistance, sometimes turning into threats, but it did everything to help him. However, the system said it could not answer this question. The hero again suggested that this is exactly what his father is doing, and that is why he does not answer directly. However, the system did not answer anything, and then the hero decided that he was still interested in what kind of creature this was, and therefore he would learn about it gradually. However, now he had something else to worry about. He wondered what his mom and Uncle Hank were doing at the moment. When he looked through the door window, he saw that they were talking to each other. The hero did not hear the conversation, but he saw that there was a smile on his mother's face. Uncle Hank smiled too, and the hero had never seen such a sincere smile on his face. The system again informed the hero that he had made a good choice. Soon, it was 10 p.m., at which point all guests had to leave the hospital. Hank left the room and saw Tony outside the door. He assumed that the guy had eavesdropped on their conversation, but the hero said that he had just come here. Then the doctor approached him and apologized for his behavior. However, the hero said that he had nothing to apologize for. Hank said that anyway. He was grateful for his help and for calling him, and now it was time for him to go. Finally, Tony asked him again if he liked his mother. Then Hank looked away in embarrassment, saying that he didn't know how to answer this question. Tony looked down with displeasure. He expected a clearer answer. He told his uncle that for the next 3 days he will be at the training center. His aunt sometimes comes to see his mother, but he would like his uncle to come sometimes too. He paid his mother's medical bills and sent him for a medical examination at the company. And now the hero realized that all this was not because of friendship with Dad, but because of his mother. He couldn't understand his feelings, so he told Hank to decide for himself. One way or another, he and he are the only ones who can take care of Hannah. Hank said he understood what the guy meant and said he would think about it because it wasn't an easy decision. Tony spent the next 3 days at the training center. When he returned to the construction site, the manager said that tomorrow they would move to a new construction site. He asked the workers to go to bed early so that they could start work as soon as possible. Then Tony approached him, saying that he had something to say. Steven suggested that he wanted to take the day off again. He said that the guy had to go out. The manager took a long weekend, so there was no one to work. Then the hero said that he had found a new job, and therefore he had to leave. Steven shouted, asking how much he needed to pay him to get the idea out of his head. He asked if it would be enough for him if he made $4 million a month here. Tony then apologized for what he said earlier. He said that he passed the final interview at Elsung Group. At first, Steven couldn't believe his ears. When he realized that Tony was actually being serious, his face contorted in shock. Then Tony said that he would not be able to come on shift tomorrow. Steven was extremely surprised that he had not even studied at university, and yet he was interviewed at such a large company. The hero looked away shyly, not knowing what to answer. Then Steven said that he had to work hard so as not to lose face. Tony didn't look up, saying he was truly sorry. At that moment, John and his partner approached them. John asked if it was time for them to eat since Tony was leaving. Steven shouted at him because they were talking about this boy leaving, and all he could think about was food. Then one of the workers said that his wife called him, and therefore he already needed to return home. Steven was very unhappy that the man wanted to leave early. However, the worker said that he disappears all day at work, and he also sometimes wants to be at home. He said that even Tony decided to quit here. There was an awkward pause between the men. Then Steven turned to the hero again. Tony assumed he would start telling him off again. However, Steven told him to come with them and have dinner. He said that he was not offering it because he liked him. He was doing it because he felt awkward. Tony smiled. He understood that even though the leader says so, he remains himself until the very end. When the men arrived at the restaurant, Steven said that Tony would not leave until he had eaten well, because office work was not as easy as it seemed at first glance. However, the hero said that he was ready for such work. Steven objected to him, saying that he did not study at the university. It would be easy for him. The others would mock him if they found out the whole truth. Then Tony looked up at him, saying that he understood all of this. However, he also understood that he had to do this. Steven said that if things don't work out for him in this company, then he can return to them. They will always be glad to see him. There will always be a place for Tony here. The hero thanked his boss for such kind words. Then his partner cleared his throat and took something out of his pocket, saying that if he had known in advance, he would have prepared a better gift. He then pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Tony. The guy was surprised, asking what it was. The man asked him to open the envelope and accept it without question. As a real adult would do, he said that this amount would be enough for several pairs of shoes. The hero immediately raised his hands, saying that he could not accept such an amount, and asked the man to take the envelope back. At that moment, John took the envelope and said that in this case, he would take the money. The man immediately yelled at him, telling him to give the envelope back to Tony. John was surprised by such a sharp reaction and returned the money back to the guy. Tony smiled, saying that he would still accept them. He was glad that even despite his departure, the men were kind to him that day. He saw his former colleagues for the last time. The very next day, he joined the Elsung group. The hero took a large black suitcase with him and went to the bus. He greeted the man who was in charge of boarding the bus and said his name. The man immediately looked at his tablet to check the data. He told Tony to get on the first bus. However, suddenly he stopped the guy and asked if he was really born in '92. However, Tony replied that it was not his year of birth. As it turned out, he was born in 1994. When the man heard this, he said that in this case, he needed to get on the third bus, leave his luggage in the cargo compartment, and go inside. Tony thought about the fact that apparently someone here had the same name as him. After getting on the bus, he kept thinking about it. His name was not the most common, so this situation was quite surprising. Then he finally found his seat and sat down there, breathing a sigh of relief. Then the bus manager said that since everyone was seated, they were going to the training center for training new employees. Tony smiled, realizing that he was now the company's new employee. He was distracted from his thoughts by the sound of the phone that was in his pocket. He received a message from Hank. The man asked him not to worry about his mother and work hard. At that moment, one of the men who was sitting on the bus suddenly stood in the middle of the aisle. He greeted everyone present, saying that his name is Marvin. He is the deputy director of the sales department of the Elsung Group branch in one of the cities and is in charge of the third bus. He also thanked everyone present for their work. Everyone on the bus also thanked him. Marvin said that he would be their supervisor for the next 4 weeks at the training center. He asked if they had decided on their type of activity. Everyone present on the bus began to awkwardly look at each other, not understanding what the man was talking about. Then he said that he had asked the question incorrectly and asked those who already knew which department they wanted to work in to raise their hands. As it turned out, no one present raised their hand. Marvin said that training and retraining of new employees is an important process in the company. The company monitors employees, evaluates their work, and based on the results of training offers a position. He joined the company just after such training. He was assigned to the sales department, where he is now doing an excellent job. Then one of the employees asked what if he got a job he didn't want to do. Marvin said that first of all, they should keep their grades at a high level. The 10th of the best students will be given the opportunity to independently choose a position. The remaining 90% will be distributed by managers, but even with the first option, there is a possibility that the position will not be suitable for the employee. However, he said that there is one loophole. After working for a year, they can apply to change their occupation, although he does not recommend this route, since the requests may simply be rejected and the old team will not take them back. When Tony heard this, he was very surprised. He realized that from the very beginning of the company, each of the employees was closely watched. He wondered what a troublemaker would look like if there was trouble on the team. He didn't know what to do if his health deteriorated and he needed surgery urgently. He was afraid that it would mean leaving his job, losing everything, and having to start over. Then the hero firmly decided that he must hold out until the last. Soon the buses arrived in the desired city. For Tony, this was all new. He felt a little strange, but at the same time he had a feeling that a bright future awaited him. After some time, the buses arrived at the company's training center. Marvin looked over all the workers, making sure everyone had gotten off the buses. He said that now all employees will receive things, tracksuits of suitable sizes and name badges have been prepared for them. Soon everyone arrived at the center where their luggage was checked and they were given the necessary clothing. One of the workers greeted Tony, told him that he had been assigned room B13 on the third floor, and asked him to change clothes and explore the assembly area. When the hero raised his head, he saw that the floors were numbered starting from the second with the letters A, B, C. He was surprised that men and women lived together. However, at this moment, one of the workers said that men are accommodated from rooms 1 to 25 and women from 26 to 50. Tony noted that they were very clever in dividing the workers by gender. After some time, he was already on his floor. Before getting ready, he needed time to change clothes. Soon he found the room he needed. When he went inside, he realized that there was one bed for two. The hero sighed with relief. He expected that 3 more people would live in the same room with him. He then took out the clothes that were given to him at the entrance. It was a fairly simple tracksuit, and he wondered why they had chosen uniforms like that for everyone. At that moment, a young man in a suit and glasses entered the room. Tony turned around and looked who came. The guy grinned, saying that the room was small enough. Tony disagreed with him, and then introduced himself. The man scratched his head awkwardly, saying his name was Archie. Tony noted to himself that Archie looked like a good man. He looked older, so the hero wondered if he should bow to him. He approached him, saying that he seemed to be older than him, to which Archie replied that he was 29. Tony chuckled, saying he was 25 and he hoped it wouldn't be a problem for them. He asked him where he should sleep and suggested that he take the second floor. Archie said that in that case he would stay on the first, and thanked the guy for his concern, because the second floor was too much trouble. Tony said that there was nothing special about it, because they would have to live together for a whole month. Then Archie was surprised that Tony got to work so early, because he was only 25 years old. He was surprised that Tony graduated from university in 3 years. Then the hero said that he received a diploma in lending and banking, so he really received his education earlier than the rest. At that moment, loudspeakers turned on throughout the building. A voice said that the trainees were expected in 10 minutes in the hall of the main building. The man said that they had little time left. Archie chuckled, saying that he felt like they were in the army. Tony agreed with him, and then suggested that they go to the gym. Otherwise, they would be late. After some time, the hero noted that the first day was quite good. The leaders apparently want to check attendance. More than 260 people gathered in one hall to listen to the speech. The man who spoke on stage said that before they began training new employees of the company, the director of the training department wanted to say a few words to them. At that moment, another man came onto the stage. The man greeted him on stage and bowed, then stepped aside so he could take his place. The bespectacled man leaned toward the microphone, smiled broadly, and greeted the interns. The trainees greeted him back. Then the man said that it was somehow quiet here. He then shouted into the microphone, asking if this was what the company's new employees were supposed to be like, and then greeted them again, this time very loudly. This time the trainees greeted the man as loudly as he did. The director said that until last year, he was the executive director of the Elsung Group headquarters. His name is Philip, and at the beginning of this year, he was assigned to the Elsung Group Training Center. He said that their group is among the top 5 companies in South Korea, but at first they were at the bottom. The 60s were difficult years. Philip went to Japan to hone his skills, and then he asked the trainees if they knew where the first refrigerator was made in South Korea. One of the trainees raised his hand and said that it was made by Elsung Group Electronics. Philip said that this is the right answer. It took them 4 years to design and create the first refrigerator. They went through trial and error. Refrigerators were very expensive in those days, but now everyone has this household item. Tony thought about the fact that the director of the training center's speech was built around the history of the company. In particular, he talked about her past and future. At this moment, Philip said that from this day on, the trainees are not just new employees, they are the whole future of the Elsung Group company. From the moment they entered this training center and throughout their career growth, they will be the people of the Elsung Group. So he invited them, starting tomorrow, to try for the future of the company. Soon the interns met with Marvin again. The man said that lights out began at 10 p.m. After 10, each of the interns would be on duty on the floor in shifts. He said that the trainees should choose a floor leader who would be responsible for organizing their work. Then he asked those who wished to take responsibility to raise their hands. Tony decided that he should try taking on the role of prefect. Some of the other trainees also raised their hands. Tony looked around and saw that besides him, several people also wanted to try themselves as a prefect. When he turned his head the other way, he saw that his roommate Archie had also raised his hand. Soon the decision was made, and after that, all the interns went to their rooms. But Tony was a little unhappy. It was his first day here, and he was already dying of boredom. He had no one to talk to, since his roommate had become a floor leader, and he was left all alone. As it turned out, Marvin really chose Archie as head boy and thanked everyone else for their activity. He said that the duration of a headman's job is 1 week. After the time is up, they will discuss the pros and cons of his job. Also, this role can be voluntarily left if a person feels that he is not coping. The trainees said that they understood everything. Then Tony decided to leave his room and wondered what he should do. He looked around and saw that the interns were having conversations with their colleagues. He thought perhaps he should take a shower since the rooms had no toilet, kitchen, or shower. There was a shared laundry room, a shared shower, a shared toilet, and so on. There were cameras in the corridors, so everything here was under surveillance. However, the hero still decided that he should take a shower. He decided that all this was trivial. While working at a construction site, he was in much worse conditions. Often there was no place to wash things, so they slept right in them on the floor. He ate noodles and beans in dusty rooms, so it wasn't such a big problem for him. When he found the shower room, he realized that there weren't as many people here as he thought. By the looks of it, the others were uncomfortable. Perhaps they had never been in such conditions. But one thing was for sure, there are enough people here who are not familiar with this kind of life and the need to share something with others. The supervisor secretly observed them and evaluated each trainee. Soon after, Tony returned to his room and continued reading his books. He noticed that it was already 9:30 in the evening. At that moment, Archie entered the room. Tony did not ask him if he had finished with his duties, to which the man replied that he still had work to do. He then handed him the papers and asked him to fill them out. He said that he was asked to give out these forms to everyone, and then Tony said that he would definitely fill it out, and then asked if Archie needed help. The man waved it off, saying that everything was fine with him and the guy just needed to go to bed. He still had things to do, but he could handle everything himself. Tony looked at his neighbor in disbelief, but agreed with his decision. After some time, night came. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Tony woke up from strange sounds. When he opened his eyes, he saw Archie standing in the middle of the room. He then stood up on his bed and asked if he was free now, to which Archie smiled and said that he had more work than he thought, and then asked, "Filled out? Does he have a questionnaire?" Tony said that he filled it out as soon as he received it. Archie was very surprised by this answer. The hero looked carefully at his neighbor's face and noticed something strange. Archie seemed to be slower, and for some reason this made Tony feel awkward. At that moment, Marvin came into their room and shouted to Archie. He said that he asked him to bring the forms by 10 p.m. and did not understand what he was doing with his room now. Archie awkwardly looked away, saying that many were sleeping now and he could not disturb them, so he would collect all the forms tomorrow morning. Marvin shouted at him, asked them if he really decided to cause him problems from the first day. Then Archie bowed to him and apologized, saying that he would drop everything off by 7 a.m. tomorrow. Then Marvin exhaled, saying that for the first time he forgives him for this, and said that he must definitely come to him in the morning. When he left the room, Tony wanted to ask his roommate if he was okay, but decided it wasn't worth it. He'd already asked him twice, and both times Archie had answered that he was fine. He knew that all he needed was a few words and then they might be able to get along. In the morning, Tony left his room when suddenly someone behind him called out to him. It was Marvin. He asked where Archie had gone, but the hero said that he did not know this since he had just woken up. Then Marvin asked to find him. He said that he would be in the small conference room at 7:30, and if Tony saw him, then he should bring Archie there. Then the hero asked the man for his number just in case. After that, the hero thought about the fact that he and Archie didn't even exchange phone numbers. He didn't even know that this could happen. However, he quickly realized that there was no time for this at all since Archie was very busy yesterday. He was distracted from his thoughts by a scream somewhere nearby. The guy immediately ran towards the noise to find out what was happening. As it turned out, something was happening near room B19. One of the men living there was dissatisfied with the fact that Archie gave him a questionnaire at 7:30 and asked him to do it by 7 because this was impossible. Now he was busy with morning procedures, and since the man volunteered to work as a headman, he needs to take everything under his own control from the very beginning. Archie bowed to him, saying that he would definitely improve, but now he needed a completed form. He then walked away, muttering to himself about how sorry he was. The neighbor of the man who had just yelled at Archie asked if he was being too hard on him. The man said that he should not feel sorry for him, because this is the fate of the headman. The one who is appointed to this role can receive 20 additional points by the end of training. He said that he had read about this in a brochure, but this is the only way to really get points, and if the headman fails, he can be replaced. Then he said that in any case it was not for them to judge his work, the managers would deal with this. Tony began to think that it would be beneficial for the company for new employees to learn how to communicate with each other from the very beginning. As a result, aggression and negativity hung in the air, and the heroes wondered what Archie thought about this. Suddenly, a system window appeared in front of him. She told him that the guy had a new task. He needed to read the brochure of the company's training center, find out all the information stored there, and be prepared for anything. He also needed to lead the team as a leader. He could make a good impression and earn credibility. The hero was extremely surprised that the system was asking him to do such a task. Suddenly, in front of him, he saw Archie, who again asked the other interns to give him the completed form. Then he approached him and greeted him. Archie asked him what happened. Tony said that the manager was looking for him. He was waiting in a small conference room on the second floor. He asked Archie to come there before 7:30. Archie cursed, realizing that he had 15 minutes left and he had not yet finished his work. Tony wanted to offer him his help, but Archie had already run forward down the corridor, saying that he could handle it alone. He then went back to knocking on the other interns' rooms to get their completed forms. Archie couldn't understand if he was really doing all this for some points, but he realized that if it were him, he wouldn't want to share them with others either. But maybe he was just embarrassed to accept support from others. However, there was a possibility that he was so blinded by the desire to increase his reputation that he forgot about human relationships, and there was nothing he could do about it. He needed to stop helping others and focus on himself. Then he called Marvin and said that he had found Archie and conveyed his words to him. When Marvin realized that they hadn't had breakfast yet, he called him into the conference room and told him that they would eat together since they were on the same team. After some time, Tony came into the hall where Marvin was already sitting. He was waiting for Archie along with ready-made statements, but he still did not come. The hero took an empty seat and began to read the brochure. He wondered to himself why Archie had taken on a job he couldn't handle. He should have done at least an interim report. At that moment, the headman came into the room and apologized for being late. He said that some people refused to participate, so he was delayed. All but 11 people filled out the form. He attached a list of everyone who did not do so. Then Marvin yelled at him, asking why everyone agreed to participate except them, and said that it was the group leader's problem. He also didn't understand how he could summarize the team when 11 people didn't fill out the application. He was extremely unhappy that Archie couldn't handle such a simple task. Archie looked down shyly, not knowing what to answer. Then Marvin said it was getting late and he should go get something to eat. Tony was surprised that Archie simply walked away, leaving the leader who was waiting for him, and did not start eating. He was quite disappointed with this behavior on Archie's part. As it turned out, Archie noticed that Tony was also in the office, and this fact made him quite angry. So when he left the office, he loudly slammed the door behind him. After Tony read the brochure, he approached Marvin and asked if he had anything else to do since he needed breakfast, to which the man said that he still needed to check the B team's forms. The hero asked him if the other teams filled out these questionnaires. Marvin said that this was mandatory, a questionnaire for new employees. Then the hero said that since he had so much work, he could help him. He was sorry that such a situation happened to his team. He said that he had a big enough dinner yesterday that he didn't need breakfast. Marvin agreed to accept help, and then Tony said that the forms of teams A and C were different, and asked the man which one was a priority, to which Marvin said that it did not matter. The problem was that more than a dozen people had not filled out the forms, and this spoils all the statistics. Marvin asked him to examine the wording of the team's questionnaires, and he was going to go try to fill out the questionnaires of those who had not yet passed it. But at that moment, Tony stopped him. He said that they have a list that was compiled by their headman, so there is no need to go from room to room. It would be easier to just call everyone and inform them that they have not yet submitted the application form. It will be much easier, and Marvin will not have to work hard. Sometime after this, trainees began to arrive in the conference room with completed questionnaires. They apologized for bringing the forms late, while Marvin watched the whole thing with a slight grin on his face. As a result, they were able to quickly complete this work, and all thanks to Tony's help. But the hero denied that he made any significant contribution. Moreover, the whole work was delayed precisely because of his team. However, Marvin insisted. He said that the hero even had to skip his breakfast because of this work. Tony said it was okay and pulled out a protein bar from his pocket. He also offered one to Marvin, as the snack would give them both strength. He said that this was a good alternative to breakfast, and he had plenty of these bars in his room. Marvin accepted the bar and said that office work is really fun. There are those who immediately fit into this life, and there are those who find it very difficult here. They then left the hall and headed up the stairs. Marvin saying that despite the number of interviews and tests that potential employees go through, this situation develops every time, although perhaps it is even for the best. Thus, they were able to filter out one more person. Then he smiled again and said that he had to work in the morning, but he was not even hungry. Then he and Tony decided to say goodbye. Finally, Marvin asked him to be sure to take more of these bars with him, and if he came empty-handed, he would give him a penalty point. After that, the manager said something else to the young intern. Sometime after this, Marvin went to a presentation where he was leading, and the interns were gathered in the room to listen to what he had to say. He asked everyone to remain quiet as Team B's lecture was going on, so the trainees who were late should return to their team. Then he asked the headman about the evening. He clarified the number of people in case someone suddenly did not come. Archie said that everything was in place now. Marvin looked at the guy incredulously and said that in that case they should start. He invited the trainees to familiarize themselves with the history of the origin and development of the company, when suddenly Tony entered the hall. Everyone present immediately turned their attention to the late intern. The hero awkwardly scratched his head and apologized for his lateness. Archie was surprised to see that his roommates still showed up to the conference. When Marvin saw the intern, he smiled warmly at him. Then he extended his hand to him and asked him to come closer. As Tony approached him, he addressed the audience again, saying that before they continued, he had something to say. He said that from now on, Tony would be the headman and asked if anyone had any objections. The hero himself was extremely surprised by this decision, but the system informed him that he had completed the task and received a reward of 5 points, and the store's reputation was increased to 20. He had an assignment to become a prefect, but he didn't think it would turn out like this. He didn't do anything, but he still felt guilty. Archie was clearly unhappy with this decision, but they would have to live in the same room, and therefore the hero did not know what to do. The lecture was completed. Marvin asked everyone to write down their thoughts on a sheet of paper about the lecture and give it to him, and the head of Team B would have to bring all the sheets to the meeting room before lights out. Before the trainees left the room, Tony asked them to stay a minute as he had something to say. He asked everyone to bring their notes to his room before 9:30 in the evening. He also said that he would create a group chat, which every trainee should join, and he would make all notifications through this chat. All the interns agreed with this, and then Tony suggested that everyone have lunch and rest a little. The only one who was dissatisfied was Archie. Soon the hero began to create the very chat he was talking about. He made a note that this chat was only for important messages, and suggested that the trainees use it only on special occasions. At that moment, Marvin entered the office where he was sitting and asked what he was doing here. Tony said that the cafeteria was crowded, so he decided to talk to the man here. He asked if it would be better if the team started taking turns eating lunch, to which Marvin replied that it was a good idea and they needed to think about it carefully. He also said that the interns had a lecture in the afternoon, and the presenter really didn't like phones ringing during his class. So if they didn't want to get demerited points, Tony should warn his team to put them on silent. The hero said that he would definitely warn everyone and thanked the man for the tip. Marvin smiled, saying that he was great at taking care of his team members, but he should not forget that he was also an intern. He then said goodbye to the intern and went about his business. Tony grinned, wondering if he could handle this since he was doing pretty well. He soon returned to his room, where he continued his work. He noted to himself that with the role of headman, he had absolutely no time for anything else. At that moment, Archie entered the room. He sat down at the table next to his neighbor and began to look at him displeased. Then he suddenly asked him if he wanted to tell him something. However, when he realized that Tony was silent, he forgot his question once again. The hero said that his person in this position is solely the decision of the manager, and he has nothing to do with it, so Archie had no reason to be angry with him. Then Archie suddenly jumped up from his chair and shouted, saying that he knew that he had reported him to the manager in the morning. However, Tony said that everything was not like that. The manager was waiting for Archie so that they could work together and then have breakfast. But his neighbor did not believe him. He could not believe that the manager would have breakfast with ordinary interns. He wanted to continue his indignation, but Tony stopped him, saying that he was not at all ready to talk about it now. He said that if Archie wants, he can take back the role, but they only say that when he calms down. After this, the hero left his room, despite all the indignation of his neighbor. Soon he came to the meeting room, where Marvin and the rest of the leaders were already there. At that moment, someone knocked on the office door, and Marvin let the man inside. As it turned out, it was Archie. He said that he wanted to change his room. He explained that under the current circumstances, he could not get along with his neighbor. Then Marvin asked him if Tony was his neighbor. Archie then confirmed that Tony was indeed his roommate, and he wanted to change rooms or wanted Tony to do so. Marvin asked what the reason should be for this. Was the whole problem really that he became the head of the team? Then Archie said that he was disappointed in the traitor. Even now, Tony came here only to lick the heels of the executive. At that moment, one of the executives stood up from his desk and walked over to him, trying to calm him down. Marvin was surprised that he called Tony a traitor. Then Archie screamed, saying that stealing someone else's position is a real betrayal. He dreamed of this job and tried to prove himself in the role of the headman, but Tony hung around Marvin and took this role for himself. Then the hero got up from his table and approached his neighbor, asking him to calm down and talking about this problem in private. He apologized to the managers and opened the door so that Archie could go out with him. But his neighbor had no intention of leaving. He said that he was currently talking to the manager. Marvin then stood up from his desk and asked Tony to stay. He said that Archie had indeed reached out to him. He grinned, saying that in that case they really should talk, but he himself had little to say. He suggested that he start by telling Archie the reason why he was replaced. Yesterday, Marvin said to collect the forms before 10 p.m. and bring them to him. And even though Archie didn't have time to do the work by that time, Marvin suggested that he do it all before 7 a.m. But Archie couldn't cope with that either. Then the manager gave him another 30 minutes, but even this did not help him. Archie tried to justify himself, saying that he still brought them. But Marvin insisted. He said that there were those who did not turn in the forms. And even if we take into account that some people are not so easy to get to cooperate, Archie could have compiled at least minimal statistics. But instead, he only brought a list of those who did not turn in the questionnaires, and such a person cannot lead a team. This was his first job as a prefect, but even that he couldn't cope with. Thus, Marvin could not allow someone like him to occupy this position. At that moment, other managers approached him and tried to calm him down, since he had already crossed the line. But Marvin said that he would not tolerate this, because Archie did not even think about his mistakes, but blamed everything on Tony. Then he told him that while he was calling his neighbor a traitor, he was trying in every possible way to shield him. The day Tony shared the candy bar with Marvin, he asked to give Archie another chance. Marvin said that he asked for a chance until the very end and supported him until the very end. He also recalled the time at the conference when he asked Archie if everyone was present in the room, to which he replied that there were none. However, Marvin himself knew very well that Tony was not in the office at that moment. Then he yelled at Archie again, saying that if he had been honest, he would have remained in office. But he had screwed up, and even if he fell at his feet and begged for forgiveness, it wouldn't be enough. He said that Archie doesn't even realize what a wonderful person he lives in the same room with. Archie and Tony looked at the leader in shock, not knowing what to say to them. Then Marvin approached Archie and asked if he still wanted to change his room, because since he came to ask him for a continuation, he would listen to him. He said the trainee has until tomorrow lunch to pack his things as he leaves the training center to go home. After that, Archie and Tony left the office. The hero turned to his neighbor, saying that this is exactly what he was talking about. He should learn to listen to others. The manager needs to calm down, and therefore Archie should come to him after dinner and apologize. He said that the leader is also a person, and he just needs to cool down a little. Then suddenly Archie stopped and apologized to his neighbor. He took a deep breath and then thanked Tony. Tony said it was just advice from the team leader, even though there was an age difference between them. They were all trainees here, so he wanted Archie to treat him like a colleague from now on. When evening came, he gathered his team near the entrance to the training center, apologizing for calling them right after lunch. He asked them if anyone was familiar with Elsung Group Gymnastics. At this moment, there was deathly silence. Apparently, none of the trainees heard about it. Then Tony said that as soon as he read the company brochure, he realized that this was a very important thing. Of the 1,000 points that trainees can receive during training, 50 can be scored in only one way. Teams A, B, and C compete with each other, and those who show the best results will receive 50 points. He reminded them once again that only the best trainees have the opportunity to choose their own occupation, so it would be a good idea for them to practice so that their team can win. Fortunately, Tony himself is familiar with gymnastics and will be able to record a video for them, so he asked his team to spend some time after dinner. As the team leader, he promised to try to give his team the best. He once again apologized to the trainees for delaying them and asked them to come by 9:30, and also not to forget about the messages that needed to be prepared. When the trainees left, they began to discuss this meeting with each other. They thought that they would only get 50 points if they were very lucky, but most agreed that this time they had chosen a wonderful prefect. When Tony heard this, he smiled warmly, mentally thanking the guys for following him. However, he suddenly realized that he had already been delayed quite a bit, and so he ran inside the building. There was only one person left standing on the street. It was Archie. Even though he had apologized to his neighbors a few hours ago, he again looked extremely unhappy. Soon the hero came to the office where Marvin was supposed to be, but he did not see the man inside. When he looked deeper into the office, he saw that Marvin was here after all. Together with his colleague, he was squatting and looking at something. Tony immediately realized that it was a broadcast amplifier, so he asked the man to let him look at it. He also gave him the sheets that he was supposed to collect from his group. He said that after the last lesson, when the former prefect was late, the rest of the trainees did everything quickly enough. but 2 people still did not turn in the forms. After a few moments, Tony said that he had completely figured it out, which surprised the other men, since they had absolutely no idea what to do with the thing. Then Marvin decided to try speaking loudly and made a test message. He turned to the 2 who had not yet submitted their forms and asked them to bring them to the small conference room. After this, the trainees who still had not had time to submit their forms immediately ran towards the desired hall. As soon as they got there, they apologized for being late and handed over their forms. Tony thanked them for their cooperation and asked if they had heard the alerts, to which the guys replied in the affirmative. Marvin's colleague, Connor, asked where he found this guy, to which Marvin grinned slyly and said that he had noticed him for himself and was not going to give him to anyone. Then the hero asked Marvin to allow him to make another announcement. He addressed the trainees from his team, saying that he was waiting for everyone for evening gymnastics in the training center hall. Soon evening came and Tony went to the appointed place. Only 5 people came to the gymnastics. The hero expected that more people would hear his message over the loudspeaker, but decided to put up with the number that he already had. Then the trainees asked how he knew about the Elsung group gymnastics, to which the hero replied that he had worked in construction long before he came here. This construction site belonged to this company. Soon he decided to start doing gymnastics. He said that he would show them first, and then they would all learn the movement together. First, they needed to warm up well so that no one would get injured. Marvin watched all this carefully. He noted that he likes Tony's approach. He doesn't fuss and does everything gradually. Marlon never thought that there would be someone so capable in this training center, and so he decided to tell everyone about this guy. After that, he decided to continue watching how the trainees practiced. He privately hoped that Tony would decide to go into the sales department after training, since such a specialist would be worth his weight in gold. Late in the evening, Tony went to the men's shower. He was very exhausted after grueling gymnastics. He understood that the main thing was not to be greedy with the prefect's points. He needed to ask other trainees for help more often. After he took a shower, he headed to his room, but he heard his roommate talking to his mother, who really wanted to check on him. The hero decided not to distract Archie from the conversation and simply silently left the room. As it turned out, Archie complained to his mother that he had been removed from his post as headman, which the woman was extremely unhappy with and wanted to come to the company and personally scold everyone. Tony walked out the door of his room and sat on the floor, dialing someone's number on his phone. As it turned out, he decided to call his mother and ask how her treatment was going. He then asked if Uncle Hank had come to see her, and when he realized that the man was still in his mother's room, he asked for the phone and thanked the doctor for keeping an eye on her. When everyone had finished talking on the phone with their families, Tony returned to his room and lay down on the bed. He decided to check the chat he had created and realized that everyone in it was very pleased with the prefect and his work. He thanked all the trainees for their kind words and said that they should continue to work hard. After this, the hero suddenly fell asleep. However, in the middle of the night, he was woken up by a strange glow. As it turned out, the system sent him a notification again. It said that the official joining date would be June 1st. Tony would start receiving his salary from tomorrow, since he got the job. Tony still couldn't believe that he was really a new employee. Then the system said that he had a new task. He needed to improve his view to increase his advantage. The hero was quite worried, but still decided to accept this task. The system gave him a gaze enhancement skill that he could use 10 times. But Tony didn't even understand how to use this thing. The system told him that he just needed to mentally say the name of the product and the word use, and then a bottle of purple liquid suddenly flew out of the system window. The hero was extremely surprised by what was happening, but extended his hand and accepted the bottle. Archie woke up at that moment from strange sounds. He immediately got angry and yelled at Tony to let him sleep. After this, the hero fell asleep, but 5 minutes before 6 in the morning, he got out of his bed and left the room. 2 trainees who were on duty that night were already waiting for him outside the door. He asked how the duty went, because he heard that it was quite cool here in the morning. Then he asked the guys to open the windows and go rest, and he would take care of the rest. When it was his turn, he decided it would be best to check to make sure there were no problems anywhere. Then he decided to activate his skill, and at that moment, his eyes took on a purple hue. Another conference was held in the morning. One of the managers said that this Friday, the interim grades will be known to the trainees. This will affect the distribution after the training center. Many factors affect their grades, so he asked the guys to work hard. Tony decided that now was the perfect time to use his skill. He checked everything he could, and if the activity is properly analyzed, then the assessments will not be a problem. Soon after, his team gathered on the court to practice gymnastics. The woman who taught the trainees gymnastics wondered why Team B was so good at gymnastics, especially the 6 people at the front. If this continues in the same spirit, then they will get the extra points. She said that she would personally give top marks to these 6 because they worked tirelessly. Tony thanked his guys for their work, saying they did a great job. Soon after this, the hero went to the office to study for the test. In order to get into the department he wants, he needs perfect grades. His teammates were extremely tired, but Tony continued to study endlessly. Soon after, trainees from Group B began to arrive in the office, also wanting to practice with their prefect. The midterm test came on Friday. Marvin said that the trainees must show all their skills in this test. The trainees who were in Team B immediately realized that the test would be very easy for them. Tony also had no problem solving the test. Soon the test results were posted on one of the stands, and the trainees were a little excited. As it turned out, Tony was in first place. When he turned back, he saw Archie standing behind him looking extremely depressed. Then the hero decided to find his name on the list, because this guy studied so hard, and he could not believe that he could have a bad grade. As it turned out, he was practically at the bottom of the list. Tony had heard that he had good results, and therefore could not understand how he could be so low. However, he quickly came to the conclusion that Archie's grade was not his problem. At that moment, the guys from his group approached him. They were proud that their leader was in first place. The trainees said that they also made it into the top 10, and it was all thanks to their wonderful prefect. But Tony said that it was only their merit, and they did not need to thank him. Then he reminded one of the interns, Josh, that it was his turn to be on duty today, so now he should get a good night's sleep. As Tony walked down the corridor, he thought that the test task prepared by the leader was quite good. He expected that he would be able to take first place only by using the skill. However, he did not think that the result depended on everyone to see, because it could become a problem for him. At that moment, a girl with short dark hair appeared behind Tony. She was trying to make sure that Tony was really standing in front of her. She wondered if he looked a little different when she was younger, but decided she would find out later. As Tony headed to his room, the system appeared in front of him again. She told him something that greatly interested the hero. When he entered the room, Archie was already sitting inside, looking extremely depressed. Tony didn't pay attention to it at first, but he felt a strange feeling in the atmosphere. He then turned to Archie, saying that he was going to bed, to which his roommate asked him if he was happy with himself. Tony didn't understand what he was asking, so Archie repeated his question. The hero looked displeasedly at his neighbor, realizing that now he would again begin to blame him for his troubles. However, Archie seemed to really believe that Tony was to blame for his failures. Then the hero sighed displeasedly and said that they agreed that they no longer quarreled, so he would pretend that he had not heard anything. At that moment, Archie stood up from his bed and defiantly apologized to him. He then angrily asked him if he should have apologized at all. He approached him and said that in this case, he would repeat his words in a more polite form. He said that it was not enough for Tony to steal his post, but he also decided to grab the first place in the ranking. The hero countered by saying that his grades were at the bottom. Archie had the worst record on their team, but Tony and his place had nothing to do with it. Archie said that this would not have happened if he had remained a prefect, and maybe he was at the bottom only because the leaders were unhappy with him. Then he suddenly shouted, saying that the leader was blind. He turned to Tony without asking what kind of relationship he had with him. He assumed they were friends or something, since he personally appointed him as team leader. He then suggested that Tony simply gave him money. The hero was so amazed by his words that he asked him to stop talking about this nonsense. When Archie once again wanted to point a finger at him, they suddenly put out their hand and hit Archie on the hand. He asked how much longer he was going to slander him, and then added that he had nothing to do with any personal relationships or bribes, and if he was accused, he would like to see evidence. Then Archie suddenly grabbed his arm, saying that Tony had just hit him. He squirmed, pretending to be in great pain, and began screaming throughout the room. He then fell to the floor and began to roll around on it, talking about how much pain he was in. Tony closed his eyes in dissatisfaction, saying that he was patient, but there was a limit to everything. Archie then stood up and asked him if he had just told him that he had crossed the line. He again blamed Tony for being at the bottom. The hero tried to object, saying that he had nothing to do with this. Then Archie screamed at him, saying that he was a real freak, and now he had a chance to fly out of here because of him. Then he suddenly shouted, saying that he was not going to give up just like that. After that, he screamed again, saying that Tony was beating him. Not wanting to listen to this nonsense anymore, the hero left the educational building. He sat down on one of the benches and decided to listen to music. However, he was in a very bad mood, so he soon removed his headphones and sat in silence. At that moment, an unfamiliar woman in a business suit approached him and asked if he was the same Tony. The hero looked at the woman and asked who she was. The girl bared her teeth, saying that he was acting rather impudently. However, the hero still did not understand what she meant. Then the girl asked him if he had given a bribe to the leader Marvin. She asked if he was really so eager to get the position of headman. When the hero realized why she was going crazy, he immediately got up from the bench and said that he didn't know where she heard this nonsense. But he doesn't do that kind of thing. Then the girl said that she had a suspicion that the manager, Marvin, had falsified the test result. Tony just walked past her indifferently, saying that he understood where the legs of this situation were coming from. He assumed that this woman was related to Archie. Then the woman threatened him. She told him to be careful with his words because she could make him fly out of the training center. Tony said that this was an interim test for employees. The manager had no reason to influence the results because he was loyal to the company. Then the girl said that something like this could harm the Elsung Group company. Besides, they have indirect evidence, and maybe it's just a fraud, but it can lead to serious consequences. She asked how she could be supportive of Tony in such a situation. The guy then turned to her and said that he didn't know who she was, but he wanted her to stop attacking him. The girl said that he, like no one else, knows what an attack is. Then Tony asked what the manager had to do with it, because if he correctly understood the reason for her complaints, then he had nothing to do with it. Framing the result and beating Archie are just his sick inventions. All this is obviously complete nonsense, for which there is not the slightest evidence. He was more than sure that they had no valid reason to accuse him of this lie. Then the girl screamed at him, saying that she could easily make him fly out of the center without even having time to say a word. She said that it was Tony's own fault that he got involved in all this. While trying to remain honest, he turned out to be very inattentive. And even if this whole situation is just rumors, then no one will believe him, since everyone knows what Archie's parents are doing. A guy who has neither money nor experience should not get involved with someone who has both, so she has every reason to blame Tony. The hero repeated, saying that he does not have any problems with information leakage, and the result of the intermediate certification is only an assessment of their abilities. They have no connection with the leader Marvin. They first met at the training center, and what about the bribe? He simply has no money. He barely received a diploma in credit and banking. He asked if someone with that kind of education didn't have the opportunity to get better scores. And if he was just studying hard and improving his skills, why would he bribe someone? And if a woman talks so often about bribes and leaks, it turns out that only people who do this can last in the company. In this case, he shouldn't stay here, since everyone here allows themselves to throw mud at another person. He said that he would give up his dream and then walked away, saying that he was tired of this conversation. The girl shouted after him so that he should not dare to leave, and then asked if he knew who she was. At that moment, a black car drove up to the training center. A woman in a long orange dress came out from there and started screaming that her son had been beaten. But no one did anything. That unfamiliar woman immediately ran up to her. She took the woman by the arm and asked her to think about her reputation, but the woman in the dress insisted that they show her the freak who beat her son. And she asked her subordinate to take care of her dear son. But the dark-haired woman insisted that she should not shout here, because this was a training center. Tony immediately realized what was happening. The dark-haired woman looked after him angrily. Tony stopped, wondering what kind of sick family had fallen on his head. Meanwhile, Marvin was resting after an incredibly hard day at work. At that moment, Tony walked past his office. He stopped because he noticed that the manager looked rather pitiful. Seeing a large suitcase next to his desk, he asked if he was going somewhere. Marvin said that a meeting of the disciplinary committee would soon take place. It turned out that Archie's father was a member of parliament, so he had no choice but to go home. Tony assumed it was because Marvin gave him a perfect score on the test, but the boss said that had nothing to do with it. He said it was a fair assessment of each team, and it just so happened that Tony earned the most points, so he ended up in first place. However, the hero noticed that the man's suitcase was quite large, so he was left with only one conclusion. Marvin said that it's like putting out a fire with straw. No matter how hard you try, nothing will change. Sometimes things don't go the way they want them to. This bastard's father ruined everything, and they won't be able to fix anything. His salary will be cut, or he will simply be transferred to a smaller office. Then he suddenly burst into tears, saying that now Tony would have a hard time even with Archie. Because of those, they needed to keep a close eye on him. Marvin was upset that he had done poorly, and it pained Tony to watch him suffer. He said that a company employee must be strong in spirit, because they are innocent, and nothing else matters. But Marvin said that their innocence does not give them anything, because their opponent is the son of a member of parliament. Then he asked if Tony was up to something. The guy said that he had a plan from the very beginning, he just had to be determined. Then he remembered the day when one of his team's interns, Josh, went to bed to go on duty that night. After that, the hero walked down the corridor, thinking about the test. When he approached his room, the system sent him an alert. When he turned around, he saw that the system was asking him a question about whether he could get others into trouble for their own good. It was a rather difficult choice for the hero, but the system said that his choice would determine the future, so he should think it over carefully. After some time, Tony and Martha went to a small meeting room. The meeting was held so late because they had a problem with information leaks, as well as suspicions of bribery and even violence. Philip said that this was the first time this had happened since the establishment of the training center. The same woman with glasses said that everything was as the director said because such incidents are simply a blatant case. She introduced herself as Anna, the general manager of new employee training, and decided to make a statement. She asked Team B's leader Marvin to be fired and disciplined. She also demanded that a new employee, Tony, who is undergoing training, be expelled. They must leave the training center. Archie's mother then entered the conversation, saying that she had not mentioned that her son had been abused, which was the most important thing in their discussion. Then she leaned over to Archie and stroked his cheek, saying that no one had the right to behave like that with a child. She then addressed the directors, saying that violence is serious, and if they don't make the right decision, she will make such a fuss that the whole country will know about it. Philip said that as the director of this training center, he is responsible for the well-being of all the trainees, so he will listen to both sides and then analyze the evidence and voice his decision. He said that if they are not satisfied with something in his judgment, or there are objections to the decision he made, then the parties should speak out right now. Archie and his representatives said they had no objection. Marvin and Tony looked at each other. They then stated that they also had no objection. Philip then read out a statement from Archie, in which he said that Team B's leader, Marvin, had provided Tony with the assessment test questions, and then he asked if the party had evidence. Archie said that all the staff at the training center have first-class education, but no one on Team B, including him, has a perfect score. Only one person on Team B got a high score. He then pointed out, without saying, that he had not even attended university, and therefore there was no way he could have passed this test with flying colors. Then Philip said that Archie's statement was circumstantial evidence based on speculation. Archie was quite unhappy with this answer. Philip then said that they needed to look at the second issue. Archie accused Team B's leader, Marvin, and intern Tony of being graded unfairly because they had some kind of relationship, and for the same reason Archie was stripped of his position as team leader. The chief said he also believed that only circumstantial evidence was provided here. Archie had no choice but to agree with this. The manager was tired and sighed, realizing that there was nothing significant here either. However, even if these accusations are circumstantial, they are reasonable doubts, and he then asked if Marvin had a rebuttal, because otherwise he will have no choice but to accept Archie's statement. Then he turned to his colleague and he completely agreed with him. Philip said that they listened to Archie's statement, and now he wants to hear from Marvin. He asked if he had evidence to refute his words. However, Marvin stood up and declared that he had nothing to say. He had no refuting evidence. Philip sighed and continued to examine the application. The executive then approached Tony, asking if he had any refuting evidence. However, to the surprise of everyone present, the hero said that he had nothing. Philip asked if he should accept Archie's statement. Then Tony stood up, saying that there was someone outside who could declare his innocence. He hoped that the leader would allow this man to enter. Archie, his mother, and Anna were extremely surprised that a witness had been found. Tony remembered the evening Archie's mother first arrived at the training center. As they passed him, the system appeared in front of him again. She said that Tony will not be able to escape the crisis, but he is not alone in this world. He has a close colleague. The system said that in human relationships, it is common to give and take, but such relationships are based on trust. First, you need to lend a hand, and the more trust there is, the more generous the rewards will be. So she asked Tony to ask others for help, and if they are his real one's friends, they will help him. Then the hero decided to write to the guys from his team, hoping to find someone who could help him. But he soon realized that he did not have many people who were ready to stand up for him. There were some people who were ready to help their headman, for which Tony warmly thanked them. After that, he headed forward along the corridor. At that moment, he saw Marvin sitting in the office next to his suitcase. Therefore, now in the deliberation room, he asked again if his witness could come in here to say a few words. Philip did not object and allowed the man to enter. At that moment, the door opened, and the man who walked inside greeted everyone present. He introduced himself as Josh from Team B. He said that he had a rebuttal that Tony knew the test results in advance. Then Josh said that firstly, they would need the B team assessment test and the OCR cards. Then Philip asked Connor to bring these cards here. Soon there were test sheets and cards on the table for 5 people who were studying the material together with the team leader. Then Philip asked Josh to explain where the evidence was. Josh said that every evening the 5 of them studied with head boy Tony. Unfortunately, with the exception of the head boy, all 5 of them answered one question incorrectly. Then Philip asked, shouldn't he be even more worried about information leakage in this case? Josh said that if all 5 of them had the same error, then their suspicions were justified, but they answered different questions incorrectly. Connor said that if this is the case, then one would think that they deliberately made mistakes on various issues. Then Josh suggested that the executives look at other papers. This was a list of people who answered 3 or fewer questions incorrectly on the assessment test. To prove their innocence, they received all the signatures. Then Philip said he would check it out. He asked, are there really that many people who have 3 or fewer errors? Josh said that this is true. He believes that the problem is not the information leak, but the complexity of the test, since it turned out to be too simple. The leader of Team B is less educated than everyone here, and this is true. But even though the company's difficult recruitment process for new employees, he was able to get here thanks to his talent. Even when they studied in the evenings, he studied harder than the others. And given that the difficulty of the test was low, Josh did not think that getting a perfect score was an impossible task. Philip had no choice but to agree with his words. In this case, it turned out that the head of Team B independently scored the maximum points. Philip said that it was already obvious. Tony is a perfect prefect and a great trainee. He tries his best every day. He is always actively involved in the life of the entire team, and the idea to prepare the material and shoot a video with gymnastics came from him, and it was this that brought their team a lot of extra points. Josh understood that his words were only a subjective assessment based on his opinion, but he suggested that the managers themselves should be imprisoned. Is a person like Tony really unworthy of receiving the highest score? He said that the headman was talented and smart, and this was an excellent reason to suspect him of a special relationship with the team leader. At that moment, the system informed Tony that he had been cleared of suspicion. The other trainees who had volunteered to help their prefect waited impatiently outside the door, trying to eavesdrop on what was happening inside. At that moment, Josh came out of the office. As soon as the door closed behind him, he immediately untied his tie, saying that he thought he was going to die from worry. Meanwhile, Philip said that after Archie's circumstantial evidence, Josh's words seemed more powerful to him, and Connor agreed with him. The manager said that they would accept the response of team leader Marvin and intern Tony on the issue of bribery and information leaks. He said Marvin and Tony were declared innocent. As he said at the beginning, he will not accept any objections to his decision. Then Archie's mother hit the table with her palm. She asked if they all thought her son lied to her. She said that she was not going to give up and could accept that this stupid guy beat her son and got a perfect score. However, she wanted to clear up the issue of him hitting Archie. Marvin realized that he was starting to boil. Then he suddenly got up from the table, saying that this mother allowed herself too much. Tony tried to calm him down, but Marvin said he had something to fight for. He asked if Tony really beat Archie, to which the hero replied that such a thing did not happen. However, he again asked the leader to sit down and calm down. Marvin had no choice but to comply and sit back at his desk. Seeing this, Archie and his mother grinned contentedly. Then Tony decided to contact Director Philip. He said he had a denial about the violence. He remembered again the day when the system asked him to make a choice. She told him to turn on the voice recording feature on his phone and leave it active for an hour. After that, he entered the room where Archie was sitting. As it turned out, he recorded their entire argument on a tape recorder. He brought this recording into the discussion room. It was clearly audible that Archie had made up the story that he had been beaten. Everyone heard him screaming that Tony was beating him, but no beatings took place. Marvin couldn't believe his ears. When Archie realized what situation he had gotten himself into, he clenched his teeth in anger. Anna and Archie's mother did not know how to react to this audio recording. The director and his colleague looked extremely worried. Tony said the audio recording lasted 10 minutes. Archie's mother looked displeased at her son, who did not know how to behave. Then Tony said that Archie's father sits in Parliament, and it would be very bad if this recording became available to the public. Then he said that Archie would admit he was wrong and leave the training center, and in this case, he would erase all the files. He said that Archie made 3 false accusations against him, but even so, he wanted to give him a chance to admit his mistakes. Tony was not going to voice any absurd requests and counter-accusations, and thanked everyone present for listening to him. Philip said that if he decided to give him such a punishment, then he allows it. Archie's mother immediately stood up from her chair and began hitting her son in the back of the head. Anna watched everything that was happening in bewilderment, realizing that she had lost. When this whole situation ended, Archie and his mother left in a car. At that moment, someone came out from the training center and called out to Anna. When the girl turned around, she saw Marvin. There was a sly grin on his face. He asked what that just happened, because he would never have thought that she could grovel in front of someone like that. He asked why the director decided to turn a blind eye to this. He assumed that Archie's mother had promised to buy her a house or a car. Then Anna said that it was all too complicated and he wouldn't understand it. But Marvin continued to mock her, saying that she probably wouldn't be very happy losing to nobodies like them. Anna asked if he was trying to slander her. Then Marvin grinned and took out his phone from his pocket, turning on the audio recording. It was recorded on the day Anna met Tony in the courtyard of the training center. The girl immediately demanded that the man turn off the audio recording. Marvin asked if she was in the mood to talk now. Then Anna asked what he needed. Marvin said that she should fulfill Tony's request and get out of here. She had to come up with the reason why she decided to leave here. Anna demanded that he give her all the notes, and only in this case would she leave. Marvin said he wasn't as good at scheming as she was, so he needed confidence. He suggested that she call the HR department herself, or he would do it himself, and only after that would he delete the audio recording. Anna swore at him. She did not expect him to do this to her. Then the man said that in this case, he had no choice but to report this to management. However, the girl suddenly stopped him. She took her phone out of her pocket and dialed someone's number. She called her boss, apologizing for disturbing him at such a late hour. She apologized and said that she was very sorry, but she would have to leave her workplace. After that, Marvin grinned and deleted all the audio recordings from his phone. Anna once again apologized to the director and said that the reasons for the dismissal were personal. The next morning, Tony could barely open his eyes. All these proceedings completely exhausted him. However, after some time, he still gathered all his strength and went to the first floor. Now the bus was about to be boarded, and he was supposed to lead his group. He went to the courtyard, saying that there were 15 minutes left before the tour of the Elsung Group plant. The journey would take 1 hour and 40 minutes, so he asked everyone to go to the toilet in advance. He said that Team B should go to the third bus. At that moment, a girl with short hair approached him. She extended her hand to him, asking if he was the same B team leader, Tony. The hero's cheeks turned red and he said that it was really him. The girl asked why he didn't shake her hand, and then Tony fussed, wiping his palms on his suit, saying that his hands were dirty, and that's why he wanted to dry them first. After that, he timidly shook the girl's hand, asking who she was, because he had seen her for the first time, to which the girl replied that her name was Samantha. She said that as of this week she was leading Team C. Then Tony asked her what happened to the one who was in that position before her. Samantha said that initially they changed every week and was surprised that things were different in Team B. However, Tony said that this is not entirely true. Then the girl suddenly laughed sweetly. She asked how long he would hold her hand. Tony laughed awkwardly and let go of his hand, saying that he would remember that the girl's name was Samantha. The girl was surprised that he did not remember her, and wondered to herself if this was really the same Tony. The hero said that the girl came second in the intermediate test, and it was amazing. Samantha then asked if he was stumbling over his words on purpose. Tony scratched the back of his head awkwardly, saying that he was a little worried, so he couldn't put two words together. However, Samantha apologized, saying that she had been too pushy, and added that if Tony, like her, decided to apply to the strategic planning department, they would see each other quite often, so she decided to get to know him in advance. The hero was surprised to hear about the strategic planning department. At this moment, the system informed him that this department is the brain of the company, determines its future and important moments. Therefore, it is considered key. The expected profit in this department can be calculated indefinitely. Tony was extremely surprised that in this department, you can earn almost endless income. When Samantha saw that he was looking somewhere behind her, she turned around, thinking that someone was standing behind her. She then turned to the man again, saying that tomorrow was their weekend, so they could go out to dinner in the city near the training center. She asked if it would be too burdensome for Tony. She said that she had thoughts on developing a strategy together for studying at the training center in order to get into the strategic planning department. You need to be in the top 5 in grades. She asked the man to think about it and hoped that he could give her time. Then she handed him a piece of paper with her phone number written on it. She said that there was nothing wrong with sharing information for those trying to get into the best department, and Tony thanked her for that. She then said that it was already time for boarding, so she needed to take care of her team. Tony sheepishly said that he had to go too. When the girl left, he continued to look after her. Samantha turned around and said that it doesn't matter what her colleagues are doing now, because their alliance is above all. Tony smiled at her and pressed the piece of paper with her phone number to his chest. At that moment, a man peeked out from behind a nearby bus, observing the conversation between Tony and Samantha. As he watched the girls leave, his cheeks turned red. When Tony returned to his room, he began to reflect on the fact that Samantha's intentions did not seem to be the purest. However, he did not understand why she decided to contact him. He was very worried about this whole situation. Meanwhile, Samantha went to the board where the test results were posted. She noticed something strange. Tony's name was both at the beginning and at the end of the list. She couldn't understand why a person with the same name scored differently. The only information she had was that the grandson of the Elsung Group chairman, Tony, was at the training center. However, she knew she didn't have enough information and needed to look into the situation more. Still, she decided she had learned enough and wondered if the company had pushed the chairman's grandson to last place. In the evening, Tony did not put on his casual clothes and went to room B20. It was he who opened the door, asking what he needed, because he had already said that he had the weekend and was not going to go anywhere. However, Tony still went out and went outside. Josh asked him if he was really inviting him to dinner. However, the hero was silent, which made Josh very wary. Meanwhile, Tony was wondering what Samantha's real goal was. The girl herself said that she was too persistent, since she decided to meet in advance. Tony knew he should aspire to be in the strategic planning department, but he didn't understand if Samantha really chose him as a partner because they took first place. He remembered her words that their alliance would be above all else. The hero decided that it was too early to show that he suspected her of something. He wondered if she was trying to defeat him in order to get ahead. However, she could also regard him as an outside observer. This girl was smart and quite impressive. All this time, Josh did not understand what was happening. He asked the headman why he was behaving so strangely. When he again didn't get an answer from him, he suddenly ran up to Tony and grabbed him by the neck, starting to laugh and asking how long he would ignore him. When the guys finally started talking to each other, Tony asked what he had been thinking about all this time. As it turned out, the headman didn't even notice that he was ignoring the guy. He said Samantha invited him to dinner. Josh was extremely surprised because Samantha was the new head girl of Team C. She was the same girl who took second place in the intermediate test. Tony noted that the guy was talking too enthusiastically about her. Josh suddenly hesitated and asked Tony why he was looking at him like that, because everyone knows that this girl is called the goddess of the training center trainees. As it turned out, she was called that from the very beginning of her stay here. When Josh started praising her too much, Tony asked him to stop. Then Josh asked him when they were dating. Tony said that he would have their meeting right now. Then thoughts began to come into Josh's head that Tony took first place, Samantha took second, and he took third. Then he asked if a strange coincidence of circumstances was to blame for everything. Tony said it was not a coincidence, but an alliance. He asked Josh if he had thought about joining the strategic planning department. Josh asked why he was asking him so suddenly whether the strategic planning department was the main target of this dinner. Tony then said that Samantha originally planned to meet only him, but he didn't really want to, so he asked Josh to join. Josh is also at the top of the list, so he decided to call him. He apologized for not saying so right away, but Josh said it was okay. He said this has been his goal since he entered university. Tony chuckled, realizing that he had actually just made it up. Meanwhile, Samantha was already waiting for Tony near the entrance to the cafe. She was a little upset that he was late. Soon she saw Tony coming around the corner. She was delighted and immediately wanted to get up and go to meet him. However, a moment later, another guy came out after him, whom she saw for the first time. This circumstance upset her quite a lot. Tony greeted her, but Samantha said she thought Tony would come alone. The hero said that he thought that Samantha would not come alone. Soon all three went to the cafe and ordered food. Tony didn't understand what was happening or what Samantha was thinking. Then the hero turned to her, saying that having dinner with her was a big part of his life. The girl said that his feelings were mutual. She said that she was very glad to meet such a talented man, and it was a pity that they were having dinner in such an inconspicuous place. She thought that Tony had never eaten anything like that. Tony and Josh were surprised by her words. The hero looked at the girl carefully, trying to understand what she meant. Samantha said slightly indignantly that they took first and third place in the midterm test, and it was amazing. Tony did not say that they tried very hard. She herself took second place, and this was also a very worthy result. However, Samantha did not answer anything. She just silently continued to eat her food. Soon it was late evening, and all three left the cafe. Samantha said that Tony's team seemed to have become a family, and Team C had already earned a reputation. Despite the incident that happened last night, the trainees do not know everything. And this is not just one incident. She remembered a video where some guy was recording gymnastics for a team. People said that he showed excellent results from the first day. There were 5 people in the video. This made the training director very angry, so Samantha asked if Tony knew that the entire C team treated him like an upstart because none of them thought of filming this gymnastics first. As a result, everyone in Team C was deducted a quarter of a rating point, so they decided to change the leader. Tony said he was sorry, but Samantha said he was the reason she got the job. Then Josh asked if this meeting was organized to study competitors and remove obstacles to the owners of strategic planning. Tony tried to stop him, but the girl said that she had nothing to hide and added that there was some truth in this. She wondered what the person who could beat her in testing was like, and wanted to meet such a person in person. Then she heard again about the night incident involving him, and she became even more interested. Her desire to find out from Tony only grew. This was precisely her motive. She is seriously aiming to get into the strategic planning department. She was wondering what the guys thought about it. Tony said that he hasn't really decided anything yet. He's just doing the best he can day by day. The girl said it was a little disappointing because everyone was doing their best. Moreover, she did not understand where else Tony could aspire, if not to the strategic planning department. She asked him to think about it, since she didn't know what the others were counting on, but she could understand him. Then Samantha thought that it would be nice if there was a way to be sure to get into the top 5. Tony said he wasn't sure that was possible, and even if there was a way, wouldn't it be better to let someone from Team C do it? Then Josh suddenly intervened in the conversation. He said that in fact Tony also wants to join the strategic planning department. This idea has not left him for a long time, and he even has proposals. Samantha said that was good, but he should talk about it on his own. Because if he is not interested in the strategic planning department, then their meeting was in vain. Tony asked her if she was saying that only those in the top 5 would be able to get into strategic planning, to which Samantha replied in the affirmative. Then George said that together with the team and Samantha, there are 6 of them, but if only those at the top have a chance, there is no chance for anyone to join. The girl said that not all of them will be able to do this. After all, they are rivals. Josh didn't understand what she was talking about, so Tony explained to him that she wanted them to split up. Samantha offered to hold negotiations at her place. As a former cheerleader, she has certain advantages in mass games. Her leader also said that she would become a female commander. The maximum number of points that can be scored is 150. If a person acts as a female or male commander, he will be awarded an additional 50, so she set herself first place with the help of bonus points. She said that she would give Tony the position of male commander, and in the future, it would help him strengthen his position as a top trainee. Then the hero asked what she wanted in return, offering this because in any case, she would take first place if he did not become commander. Then the girl took a sip from her glass. Then she said that she wanted to join them and asked to be accepted as a participant. Tony was extremely surprised that she wanted to become part of their team. If you think about it like that, everyone in the top 6 is part of their group except for the intern in second place. Then Tony guessed that what she really wanted to do was keep an eye on them. Personally, he didn't care whether she joined or not, however, he had to know how others would react. He said that he would ask the group members what they thought about this, because he was not the only one to make such a decision. Then they promised to contact each other a little later. When Tony returned back to the training center, he spoke with his trainee about who wanted to join the group. He said it was Team C's leader, Samantha. One of the interns was extremely happy about this news and said that he definitely agreed. The girl was also very happy, saying that Samantha is the goddess of the training center trainees. The man supported her, saying that she got everything, both intelligence and beauty. He asked where she was now and asked to bring her to them right away. However, Tony stopped him, saying that she would not join them just like that. She would make him a male commander in the mass games. Then one of the trainees said that it didn't matter because she herself asked to join their group, and she was very envious of her beauty and femininity. The other girls also agreed with her. Thus, the entire team agreed that Samantha would join them. Tony thought their reaction was much better than he expected. Soon the clock struck 10 p.m. Active negotiations were in full swing within the training team. At that moment, Samantha walked into the office and greeted everyone present. She said she was going to join their group. The hero noted that it was surprising that she came so quickly. The rest of the trainees immediately ran up to the girl and began asking her about various things. Time flew by quickly. A whole week has passed since then. One of the interns asked if Samantha had finished her work, but the girl said that she was more interested in something else. She asked if Tony wasn't an amazing person. He explains only the most important points. Sometimes it is not so easy to understand them yourself. She thought to herself that he was talking about the necessary things, as if he had learned everything in advance. This is impossible if he is not the director's grandson. A few days later, the test results were posted in the hallway again. Tony again took first place. However, he noticed that one of his trainees was no longer at the top. The guy said that he tried his best. Tony then asked him to work harder next time since they were in the same study group. The guy said that his results are quite normal, and he cannot be compared to such learning monsters as he and Samantha, but the hero still asked him to give his best, because there is nothing that he cannot do. He assumed that the guy would soon overtake him. Samantha noted to herself that Tony was good at building relationships. Usually people shy away from the best intern because they see him as competition. She suggested that it was all about his calm character. He had developed leadership qualities, and he had a good sense of humor. She assumed that was why people liked him. However, Samantha wondered if the grandson of a powerful family had some weaknesses. Then she smiled, thinking that this guy was very interesting. Tony soon went to one of the offices because he had to prepare a presentation, and it turned out to be more difficult than he thought. Josh approached him, asking if his presentation was ready, since he would soon need to speak. When he realized that Tony was not ready yet, he offered his help, but the guy said that he had to handle it on his own, but thanked his friend for his help. The hero was frantically trying to figure out what to write on the next slide. He understood that all this was not so simple, but time passed. Suddenly, the system appeared above his head again, telling him that new products were available to him in the store. He was awarded 2 scoring points for maintaining first place in the top for 2 weeks in a row. The more honor points he had, the more rare items he could purchase from the store. In the store, he could choose to memorize all the functionality of PowerPoint or create the perfect presentation. Tony was pleasantly surprised by such a good selection of products. Soon it was time for the presentation, and Tony made it a success. Josh said he did a great job, and the rest of his team supported him as well. The guy suggested that the headman would again take first place. He said that Tony did a great job, and this was his first time, but the hero said that he was exaggerating and evaluating it subjectively. The hero thought to himself that this was not the first time. He learned a lot at a construction site. He conducted physical exercises in front of an audience of more than 600 people. He even got into an argument with someone he just met about the amount of construction work, sometimes requiring him to work hard for days to get paid. It was necessary to always remain confident. It was necessary to believe that he could combine everything, hard work and a sense of responsibility. However, this was not a complete list of what he needed. He also needed to think rationally in order to get a decent income and not suffer losses. Compared to him, his colleagues are not so developed in the social aspect, but they will soon get used to it. He was just lucky, because people from various circles in which he knew since childhood helped him a lot. But at the same time, he is also worried about something else. He has come so far, remaining first in the top. But he wondered whether he would be able to reflect his successful activities in the training center in real life. He understood that he would definitely not be able to do this, since everything would not always work in his favor. But he decided that he would get used to it. Soon, a meeting of graduates from different universities took place at the training center. Tony sat in the stands and watched what was happening. At that moment, Marvin approached him and asked why he was here alone. He said that Tony should return to the office since he was not on the list of university graduates. But the hero said that this was not necessary. The manager told him that education was not the main thing, and therefore there was no need to be so upset. But Tony could not help himself. Then Marvin sat down next to him and asked him to go somewhere with him. Tony didn't understand where he was taking him, but Marvin said that he just had to listen to him because he was his boss. Soon they left the training center into the courtyard. Marvin told him that the director of the Elsung group really likes swimming pools and saunas, which is why each of his buildings is equipped with them. Then he invited the guy to go to the sauna with him. He said that the reunion would last another 2 hours, and they had nothing to do there for that long. But Tony asked if it wouldn't be weird to spend so much time in the sauna. He said that this was quite unusual, since he had previously only used the pool and sauna at a construction site. Marvin said that there are not many water signs in the director's horoscope, so when the company was first founded, there were incidents. It was funny, but such a large company makes decisions according to Chinese feng shui and the position of the stars. Thus, Tony agreed to go with his supervisor to the sauna. The man noted that the trainee has a fairly strong body. Tony thanked him and said that Marvin had a nice body too. Marvin said that he needs to pay more attention to his physical fitness, since he is no longer young, and working in the sales department is not so easy. He was invited many times to drink to get a discount. Taking this opportunity, he decided to offer Tony something. He asked him to come to their sales department and promised that he would teach him everything. The hero was a little surprised by such an unexpected proposal. Then Marvin said that he did not need connections with his classmates for this. He said that for this it does not matter where he comes from or what he has done. It is enough that he is diligent and hardworking. Tony then apologized and said that he still needed time to make a decision. Then he fell silent for a while. After that, he covered his nose with his fingers and sank under the water. Underwater, he saw the system window again. She announced to him that he had completed a hidden mission. He defeated the new program and could now cure his back. As a reward, he received a healing elixir that could cure all ailments. Soon after, Marvin and Tony headed to the bathhouse. Marvin decided that he should voice his proposal again. He said that Tony was guaranteed to succeed if he worked with him. He would make sure of it. However, the hero said that he doubts, and for good reason. Marvin asked him the reason for his doubts. Tony said his goal was to get into the strategic planning department. Marvin was surprised by this answer, but Tony showed with his entire appearance that he was determined. After this, the men went into a cold bath, and Marvin said that it was not worth joining this department since this work would break him. He said that most people got there through connections, and most likely no one would help him. In his opinion, the strategic planning department would not take him anywhere in life. He insisted that Tony should not overthink it, because their world is not as enchanting as it might seem at first, especially the strategic planning department, where all the elite gathered. He once again asked the guy to come to him, since in the sales department he would at least be peopled and will appreciate his work. Tony said he would take his words to heart and then asked why he knew all this information so well. Marvin said that at first he too wanted to get into the planning department, and then he saw and experienced what the elite were capable of. He graduated from the center in 4th position at the top, which is why he got the chance to join the planning department. He then asked Tony if he knew that to join this department he had to work in each position for a year. Martin himself failed the final selection, wasting a whole year. He said the reason for this was his education, having graduated from a less popular university than those he competed against. Then Tony thought about what was happening to university graduates. If that was the case, then he now understood why Marvin was so eager to promote the sales department to him. However, he thought that he could get there at any time, while there was only one chance to join the strategic planning department. He was sorry to upset Marvin, but he had already made his decision. He was determined to get into the strategic planning department. Soon a new school day began at the training center. One of the interns was sitting in room 127. At that moment, a man came to him and asked if he had joined the company. When he realized that the guy did not recognize him, he said that he was an assistant manager and his name was Chester. However, the guy didn't know where he knew him from. As it turned out, this trainee was a 3rd-generation employee of the Elsung Group. Tony, he got a place in the company thanks to the vice president of his father, and at the moment, he occupied the last place in the top. Chester said he once saw him at Jix University for a study meeting. However, Tony didn't want to listen to him. He asked him not to pretend that they knew each other and not to talk nonsense. He said that the others should not know that he was here. Chester honestly said that he understood everything, adding that he never thought that he would meet Tony here in this way. Then Tony asked him to stop sucking up and asked him what he could teach him. Chester said he had a couple of exam questions left over from previous years, but Tony was more concerned about where he could have fun. When he realized that Chester did not know the answer to this question, he said that it was of no use. He then sent the man to buy him something fizzy. When Chester left, Tony cursed under his breath. Not understanding why he had to endure this, he wouldn't even get the position of director. He understood that his grandfather was going to pass his place to his father, and his father was too greedy. Then he suddenly thought that Chester could be one of his father's men. Meanwhile, Chester went to the board on which the test results were hanging. He saw that Tony's name was in 1st place. He was happy for the young master and thought that the vice president would be happy to hear that he had once again taken 1st place at the top. Soon, one of the employees went to the vice president to report that Tony did not take 1st place in the top for the 1st and 2nd weeks. He said that giving him some exam questions in advance was a good idea, to which the man replied that his only son gave him so many problems, but now he seems to have settled down. Then the man asked him how the director was feeling. The man replied that, unfortunately, he was in good health. The doctor said that the old man would live at least another 10 years. The man was extremely annoyed that he was holding out for so long. Then the man said that doctors always say something like that, but perhaps the director is hiding his real health condition. The man said that he must collect as many shares as possible and obtain the rights to manage the company. He said that they are purchasing them little by little, using close partners, but this will take some time. Meanwhile, preparations were in full swing at the training center. The trainees brought flags of different colors to their headman. Samantha asked each of the trainees to take 2 flags and compare their order with the picture. Tony said that in this case you need to take the flags in the required order. Then Samantha suggested that they first watch a video from last year, and based on it, they would practice, and they should also try to add some new color. Tony suggested moving as they planned, confident that they could handle it. The trainees shared his sentiment, saying that together they would succeed. Thus, preparations for the games began. Samantha and Tony showed the trainees how they would perform. Before practice began, Tony, as the team leader, distributed his points among his teammates. The other trainees were glad that they were not in the position of their prefect. Everyone else would practice tomorrow, but now they needed to sort out the flags. Soon Tony spoke to them over the loudspeaker. He again asked them to make sure that everyone took 2 flags. All of Tony's comrades expressed great gratitude to him, probably in large part due to the division of points. The practice went smoothly, but that didn't mean they didn't have any problems at all. One of the interns approached Tony, asking him to take this activity seriously, but the guy wondered who he was to tell him what to do. The intern didn't know what to do because this situation was not an easy one, so he decided that he would simply call the headman. He said that his namesake was not doing anything and was just playing on the phone. Then Tony said that he would definitely talk to him. He completely headed to the corner of the hall where his namesake was sitting. He said that he was seeing him here for the first time and asked if his name was Tony too. He said that he wanted to ask about what didn't suit him here, because in that case he could help him. Then Tony simply asked to be left alone, and the headman said that in this case, it would be better for him to simply kick him off the team. Tony was surprised by this answer. Then the headman said that he would carry him out and say that he was wounded. They still had too many people on the team. Tony was happy with this decision, asking if he would really take responsibility for the consequences upon himself. A few days later, mass games began. As expected, Samantha and Tony were the leaders. Almost all trainees participated in the mass games. Then Tony announced that the training center was launching its 68th mass games. He raised his hand up, calling out the command's battle cry. All this was closely observed by company executives and journalists. One of the managers turned to the director. He said the atmosphere at the training center was surprisingly pleasant. He added that there is great energy coming from these two commanders. Looks like they were worth paying attention to. Then Philip said that, apparently, Tony and Samantha would not leave others a chance to be in first and second place in the final selection. The manager was extremely surprised when he heard Tony's name. Meanwhile, new test results were posted on the board. Tony, the manager's grandson, discovered that his name was in second to last place. He did not understand why the same thing was happening for the third week. He could not believe that everyone else was doing nothing but studies. However, he understood that his father could not know about this. At that moment, his phone rang. It turned out that he received a message that his card limit had increased. He didn't understand why this happened and assumed that his father was in a good mood. Meanwhile, a meeting of management was taking place at the company, at which it was decided to watch a video of mass games of new employees, initiated by the founder of the company, El Sung Group. One of the men approached the director, Christopher, saying that Tony had taken first place in the top of the training center. He said he has a good chance of winning, with second place a whopping 18 points behind him. Christopher was very surprised that his grandson finally got the championship. He thought that he must have pulled off some kind of trick. Then another man approached the director, saying that he had been to these mass games. He said that he saw Tony for the first time, and he seemed to him a noble young man. He was impressed, because the guy sang well and successfully led the process of mass games. Christopher couldn't believe what the men were saying. The CEO doesn't waste compliments, so Christopher decided to see his grandson's success when he watched the video. He didn't understand when Tony had become a commander, but he thought that he had finally decided to settle down. Soon, the lights in the hall were turned off so that everyone could see the video recording. An image appeared on the screen that showed the beginning of the mass games. On stage were Samantha and Tony, who were the game directors. Soon the screen showed a close-up of Tony's face. Then the general director turned to the manager, saying that his grandson had a well-trained voice. However, Tony's father, Matthew, realized that this guy was not his son. Christopher wasn't very surprised because he knew that Tony would never get his head together. A person can't change that quickly. However, he was still curious about something. He wanted to know who this young man was, who was the namesake of his grandson. Then he remembered that he had met a guy in the bathhouse quite recently. He wished him luck in his endeavors. Then he realized that this was the same guy he met at the construction site, and he was glad that he came to the Elsung Group. When the meeting was over, the CEO said that he couldn't believe that Tony had grown up and become part of their company, and then he asked the CEO why he had hidden him for so long. However, to his surprise, Christopher replied that it was not his grandson. He said he knew the first-place winner personally. He then asked his son when the training center program would end. Matthew replied that it would end next week. Then Christopher decided that maybe he should take a look there. When Matthew was alone, he decided to call his son. He was extremely annoyed by everything that was happening. He asked his assistant to bring Tony to him right away. However, Tony was at that moment in one of the expensive bars. The bartender said that he ordered a statement for 2,470,000 won. Then Tony said that today he was treating everyone. His friends were glad that his card had finally been unfrozen. He told the bartender that he would pay the entire amount at once. However, when he swiped his card, something went wrong. The bartender asked him if he had another card, since the system wrote to him that this card was blocked. Tony said that was impossible because it was his father's card, and then handed him another card. However, the ATM again refused to accept the card. The bartender reported that this card was considered lost. Tony didn't understand what happened to his father, because he had just recently raised his limit. Then the bartender asked if he had another card, When he realized that the guy did not have work cards or cash, he said that in this case, he would call the police. Soon it was time for the excursion, and all the trainees went to the mountains. The guide asked to be notified in advance if someone was unable to participate in the hike due to health conditions. Tony sat with Marvin. The leader asked him how he felt at the end of the training period, to which the hero replied that he was very satisfied. Marvin said that it looks like he will stay in first place until the very end, which is impressive, but the hero said that there is still one more step left. Meanwhile, Samantha stared blankly out the window. The rest of the interns were chatting happily among themselves. In the evening, the bus arrived at the right place. Tony informed his team that it was dangerous to walk at night, so the trainees had to always stay in pairs. Soon, all the trainees went to the mountains. The hero turned around to look at his team again. All the trainees obediently followed him and Marvin. Thus, the guys climbed the mountains for some time. At some point, Tony felt a sharp surge of fatigue. Then he suddenly stopped. Unable to breathe, Marvin immediately grabbed him by the shoulders, asking what happened to him. Then Tony suddenly said that his back hurt very badly. The next moment, he screamed in pain, unable to bear these sensations. They were forced to stop, and then Tony told Marvin about his story. The man asked how long he had been living with all this and if he had any painkillers. He asked Tony to talk about the fact that he had an inflamed back right away next time, because you can't go camping under the influence of pills. But the hero replied that refusing to take part in a camping trip due to a health condition is equivalent to disqualification. There was a choice. He turned to Marvin, asking him to close his eyes to this situation if possible. The manager then asked if he could continue, to which Tony replied that he would have to do so. He said he would reach the top again. However, he once again asked Marvin to do him a favor and pretend he never saw it. Then the manager asked him why he even agreed to such distances. Tony thought to himself that if he gave up now, he might not have to start at all. After some time, he realized that his back was starting to hurt again. Apparently, the analgesics were gradually wearing off. However, he couldn't give up now. He had to endure until the end, even if it hurt too much. Thus, he was able to reach the top of the mountain with Marvin and took a memorable photo there. Soon, all the trainees returned back to the training center. As the training came to an end, Marvin took to the stage to reward those who had achieved amazing results. He asked some people to come on stage. Among them was Samantha. Tony also stood up from his seat. Thus, Tony, Samantha, that guy Oliver who was watching the couple a few days ago, Josh, and another intern from Tony's team came onto the scene. Marvin said that on any special occasion, the director would personally give an award to each of them. He then asked everyone to greet Principal Christopher. When Tony turned to look at the man, his face contorted in surprise. He heard that the director rarely appears in the media. Christopher walked onto the stage and waved to everyone present. Then it suddenly dawned on Tony. He remembered the day when he took a sauna with some old man, and now he realized that this old man was Director Christopher himself. Tony looked at the man in surprise, not knowing how to behave. Samantha looked at Christopher with respect. She thought to herself that she returned here after 10 years, being indebted to him. Marvin said employee Tony received an award for his persistence in maintaining the top spot during the center's new worker training program. Then Christopher asked him how he was feeling. Tony timidly replied that he was in shock and could hardly believe what was happening. Then the director handed him a certificate, congratulating him on the fact that he had done a great job. He asked him not to stop there and continue to conquer amazing heights. Tony accepted the certificate, still not believing that he was really here on this stage. Christopher then turned to Samantha, saying that she wasn't so lucky. She would have been first if her activity was considered by last year's standards. However, he asked her not to lose her desire for the best, because their company needs more talents like her. The girl thought to herself that everything happened only because of Christopher's support. Thanks to him, her heart disease was cured. She thanked the director and accepted the certificate. This concluded the training center program for new employees. The interns went to their rooms to pack their things. Now Tony could only wait for the results to find out which priority department they would be transferred to, based on their first, second, and third choices. Now he had 5 days left to rest. During this time, all trainees will receive information regarding assignment to departments. Tony knew he had only one thing left to do, and that was to use the reward he'd received for the hidden quest. Soon the hero arrived at the hospital where his mother was lying. He understood that he needed to hurry. He wondered if this elixir could cure his mother. However, he was also worried about what to do with his back. However, this was not so important, because if his mother was healthy, then worries about his back would disappear by themselves. Soon the guy stopped in front of the door of the oncology department. He took the elixir out of his pocket. As it turned out, a few days earlier, Hannah's doctor told Hank that the breast cancer had spread to the lymph nodes, lungs, and liver, and further treatment could not be continued at their hospital. Hank immediately shouted, asking what they meant. This was the best hospital in Korea. The doctor asked him to calm down because the man was also a doctor, and who else but him would know what was happening to the woman. Then Hank was asked if there was really no way out. The doctor said that the best option would be to spend the last moments of her life next to her, and this is what the patient herself wants. After that, Hank went to Hannah's room. The woman asked him not to worry. She said that her sister would pick her up in 3 hours, and he needed to go home. However, Hank insisted. He said that he would pick her up and take care of her. He packed her things into a suitcase, sat her in a stroller, and said that they would go home. At that moment, Hannah's son entered the room. Hank was upset to see Tony there as he knew he would have to give him bad news. Hannah was also surprised to see her son there. The hero did not understand why his mother was suddenly being discharged. He then knelt down in front of her, and Hannah told him that she wanted to go home. But Tony asked her why she was in a stroller, because her treatment was not over yet. Hannah smiled forcefully, saying that she had some reasons for this. However, Tony did not want to listen to all this. He said that he could definitely fix everything. Then Hannah hugged him tightly and held him close. She cried, saying that she was very sorry. When evening came, Hank called a taxi so he could ride with Hannah alone. The woman asked why he asked to go separately, to which the man replied that he wanted to discuss something with her alone. Then he turned away from her. I don't know where to start, but he decided to tell it like it is. He proposed marriage to Hannah. The woman was shocked by this proposal. She asked what he was talking about because he needed to live his life. Hank said that this is his life, and he regrets that he let Hannah go to her husband a long time ago. They could have lived happily together if this had not happened. He said he believed her husband would have their heavenly support, and he would take charge of Hannah's life and be there for her until one of them died. Hannah cried, saying that she would only be a burden in his life, but Hank said that he didn't want to regret anything anymore. Soon evening came and Tony arrived at his mother's apartment. He carried his suitcase upstairs. However, when he opened the door of the room, he realized that no one was home. At that moment, Hank came out of Hannah's room. He said that she fell asleep after taking painkillers. After that, the men went to the living room. An awkward pause hung between them. Hank said he had to go but would be back soon with his things as he planned to live here for a while. Hearing this, Tony smiled and approved of the man's decision. He walked him to the exit, watching him get dressed. Finally, Hank turned around and addressed Tony. He asked him not to worry about his mother, as he would take care of her. After that, he said that he could call him if something happened. When Hank left, Tony went to the room where his mother was. He sat next to her on the bed, thinking to himself that she had been through a lot. Then he reached into his jacket. Soon he pulled out a bottle with a multicolored liquid. He said that he wanted to give this elixir to his mother. He tilted the bottle down, intending to give it to Hannah, but it didn't flow. Tony examined the bottle carefully, not understanding why the liquid was not flowing out. Then the system told him that the liquid would automatically flow when he brought it to the desired place of use, and then Tony again tilted the elixir to his mother's lips, after which the liquid began to flow. When the liquid touched her lips, his mother's bed suddenly glowed with a bright light. He intended to give his mother the whole bottle, but when she drank half, the liquid stopped flowing again. The system told him he had used enough and asked Tony to use the remaining amount to heal his back. Then Tony suddenly realized that the system knew that he would use the elixir to cure his mother, not himself. After some time, morning came. When Hannah woke up, she was surprised to find that her body did not hurt at all. She couldn't believe that this happened to her. It was like some kind of miracle. Tony watched his mother with a smile. He then addressed the vials, saying that he did not know who was responsible for all this, but he was immensely grateful to him. Soon after this, Hank arrived at the apartment. He still did not fully believe that the woman would be able to go down the stairs on her own. He suggested that he would carry her in his arms, but Hannah said that she was fine. She didn't understand how this was possible. At first it seemed to her that she was completely asleep. Then Hank suggested going to the doctor and finding out what he would say, but for now it was better for her not to strain herself. As it turned out, the study confirmed that all cancer cells had completely disappeared from Hannah's body. The attending physician accepted the results, although he had difficulty believing what was happening. Mr. Hank, being a doctor of another specialty, could not admit the reality of what was happening without proper medical explanation. But in the end, he had no other choice. He left the office and sat down next to Hannah and Tony, saying that miracles of course happen, but they need to monitor the woman's health very carefully. After a while, Hannah, Hank, and Tony finally got used to the current state of affairs. His life as a hero as a full-time employee began. He arrived at the headquarters of the Elsung Group head office. At that moment, one of the workers approached them, asking if the rest of the workers had received their salaries, because they were supposed to receive 3 million, as it turned out. He only received 2,210,000 won. Then Josh said him that the senior said that they receive 80% of the rate only during the internship. Then he turned to Oliver, who was the leader of Team A. The guy said his name was Clyde and said it was nice to meet the team leader. He said that here they were all practically 26, but Tony said that he was 25, explaining that he went to school early. Oliver said he turns 28 this year, studied abroad, and joined the company a little later. She and Clyde decided that they would take care of each other. At this moment, Albert, the director of the strategic planning department, approached them. He said they didn't have much time and asked everyone to go to the conference room. When everyone arrived, he welcomed all the workers to his department and said that he is not sure if they have heard about this. But the planning department accepts workers who have been in the Elsung Group company for 3 years, after which they decide which 5 people will stay. Then Josh said that he had a question. He was wondering what they should do for 2 years while waiting to be accepted into the department. Or he said that they all know what to do. Strategic planning is called the flower of the Elsung Group. Then he asked the workers what happens when a flower does not open its petals. Josh replied that in this case the flower is not able to reproduce. Connor said that without flowering there is no reproduction, and without reproduction it cannot grow, and this will cause it to wilt. The company must continue to grow for a future in the global market. A declining company will not survive. So everyone here needs to be willing to become a flower to join their department. They need to excel in several areas to achieve their goal. They cannot teach how to become a flower. Workers must achieve this on their own. Only personal experience contributes to real growth. Then he took out small pieces of paper rolled into tubes from his pen. He said that here are the departments in which the employees will work. They will have to choose one in reverse order of the evaluation top. Tony couldn't believe he was relying on chance. The first was Clyde. He said he made the 3rd team in life insurance sales. Josh said that he was assigned to the electronics quality control department of the Elsung Group. Oliver said he was in HR. Samantha said she was in the company's electronics and home appliances sales department. Tony wanted to announce the department he was in, but Albert stopped him. He said that he didn't have to say it out loud. There was still only one department left. He then addressed the employees, saying that in 2 months he would receive a report on their work and their progress from the heads of the department, on which they would rely to judge their abilities. Then Clyde asked what would happen after these 2 months. Albert said that they would be transferred to another department, according to today's principal. A few days later, Tony was sitting at the bus stop, waiting for his bus. However, before he stopped, a black car suddenly stopped. Hank looked out from there and said that he would give him a ride to the station. Otherwise, he would be late on his first day of work. He said he knew Tony's office address because he saved it on his phone. He was lucky that he works near his company. He also asked the guy not to worry. He said that he used to live in that area, and the guy can stay with them until he gets married. Tony said he's not worried. He's even grateful that he has a place to stay in Seoul. And if it weren't for Hank, he would have had to travel all this way alone or find a studio. Then the doctor asked him how his back was. The hero hesitated a little, not knowing what to answer. The day he gave his mother half of the medicinal elixir flashed back in his memory. After that, the system asked him to use the remaining remedy to cure his back. Tony obediently drank the rest of the elixir. Immediately after this, he felt that there was no more pain in his back. At that moment, he heard his mother's voice from behind the door. When he realized that his mother wanted to see him right now and tell him that she was feeling great, the system immediately informed Tony that he needed to hurry up and hide the elixir. A few seconds later, the woman opened the door and asked what her son was doing there. Now Hank said that if Tony needed painkillers, he could ask him for it with them, he might feel better. But it was only a matter of time. He said that he would not tell his mother about this, but the operation should not be postponed. Then Tony said with a smile that he would come to him soon to examine his back. Hank smiled and looked at the guy warmly. Meanwhile, the story moves to the branch of the life insurance sales department. Marvin walked up and down the department, not knowing what to do. Then he suddenly saw that a new advertisement had been posted on the stand, and immediately went there. He was very pleased to see Tony's name on the list of new employees in the department. At that moment, the branch manager approached him, and Marvin immediately addressed him. He said that they had a new employee coming in today, and he was bringing him up to speed. But the manager said that he had heard that he had lost a lot of money because he was forced to become a manager. Marvin said they got a capable worker in return because Tony is a very smart guy, and he wanted to show him around and teach him a thing or two. The manager said that if he was so eager to help him, then he would help him. He said that the new employee was now at the coffee shop on the first floor. Apparently, he forgot his pass. Then he asked Marvin to go down there and bring the employee to them. Marvin replied that this was very unlike Tony. When he went downstairs, he saw a complete stranger to him. Tony, the son of the vice president, informed him that he was now a new employee of the company. He serenely sipped his coffee and didn't even get up to greet the team leader, whom he remembered from the training center. Meanwhile, the story moves to the head office of the Elsung Group. Tony arrived at his place of work. As it turned out, Oliver worked there. The men realized that apparently they were assigned to the same department. He asked, not jokingly, whether the HR department really doesn't suspect that they are here through the strategic planning department. Oliver laughed and said that apparently they didn't know. Soon the men reached the office they needed. There was a girl sitting inside and they immediately greeted her. The girl realized that these were new employees and asked them to wait a couple of minutes on the sofa. Oliver and Tony went to the couch, waiting for the girl to approach them. Soon she came to them, saying that she was sure that they recognized her because they had met on personality assessment tests. Tony immediately noticed that she turned away from them her badge, which had her name written on it. Then Tony suddenly remembered the day he took the test. The girl introduced herself as Kimberly, saying that she joined the company in 2017 and was looking forward to productive work together. Then he told her that he remembered her and how she joined the company. The girl said that he had a very good memory because he even remembered her name. He didn't say that the result of their personality test was really amazing. He was very surprised when he saw it. That's why he remembered it. Then another man came into the office and asked how Kimberly was getting on. The girl said that the new employees remember her name, and apparently they did well on the personality assessment tests. Then the man, whose badge was also hidden in his pocket, asked Oliver if he remembered his name. The guy was confused. He didn't understand how this man knew his name, and moreover, he didn't understand how he should remember his name. He decided that he needed to guess his name in order to earn their favor. Then he assumed that the man's name was Marvin. Hearing this, the man was extremely annoyed. Then Oliver decided to admit that he did not remember his name. Kimberly said it was normal since it had been 2 months since they met. However, the man said that if he wants to make a good impression, then they should point their fingers at the sky. He asked Oliver if he was going to guess the names of the clients he would be working with. He then turned to Tony, asking if he remembered his name. The hero said that he is assistant manager Connor, who became a member of the corporation in 2014. Then Connor shook his hand, praising him for his good memory. He said that Kimberly was keeping them up to date, and their first task was to sort through resumes. But she said that they would later join the strategic planning department and doubted that they could be trusted with information and personal data. Connor said that as soon as he came here, he was plowed everywhere without caring about personal data. So you need to let them join the work process. They will leave their department so quickly, they are not their people anyway. Tony was surprised that they knew they were submitting to the planning department. Then Kimberly laughed, saying that perhaps they would change their minds and stay here, as she herself had done before, because they also needed workers. Then Connor said that it didn't matter to him, because it wasn't up to him to decide anyway, and left the office. Kimberly explained to the guys that, to be honest, she looked in admiration too. She does strategic planning and dreamed of working there, but after trying many other jobs, she suddenly realized that HR was the best option for her and decided to stay here. Tony took this to mean that Kimberly had also been a top trainee back in the day. The girl asked him if he knew what the job of a human resource manager was. Tony said that to his knowledge, working in the department includes periodic training. In the process, they are associated with the recruitment of personnel, such as government or special significance, and the department's employees are also responsible for the reassignment of employees. Kimberly smiled, saying that it looked like he was preparing for the meeting. She said that they are responsible for everything that can be related to personnel and its management. Their main task is collecting data on employees and structuring it into a database. She then asked the guys if they were familiar with their company's office software, to which the men responded in the affirmative. She said that they now have about 3,000 applications for special purpose workers, so she asked them to sort them according to the criteria, location abroad, 3 years of work experience, and what department they are from. The men will work on this together, so they should distribute responsibilities. Tony and Oliver agreed immediately. Oliver said there were only 3,000 entries, so they had to split them in half. He asked Tony to do the first 1,500, and he would take care of the second half of the documents. Tony asked him if he thought there was any way they could get it done faster. Oliver asked him if he didn't agree with him. Kimberly then asked them to hurry up and start work as she had to hand it in by the evening. Oliver immediately pulled himself together and said that he would get to work right away. Thus, they worked for 3 hours. Tony was almost finished. All he had to do was transfer the information from the documents into the table. It wouldn't take much time. However, Oliver was not doing so well. He was very exhausted by this work, and he was not sure that he would finish by the evening. Tony then stood up from his seat and approached Oliver, asking if he had finished. The man was surprised, asking if he had already sorted his part. The hero said that the program has an auto-filter and search function. He used it to sort the data according to categories, and now all he had to do was print the documents. Oliver said that it looked like he wouldn't be able to finish today, and he didn't know what to do. Then Tony said that he took care of his half of the documents. They could say that they did it all together. Oliver couldn't believe his partner had helped him so much. The hero said that you need to respect your comrades and love your country, and then everything will be fine. Then he called Kimberly, saying that they had finished the work together. They did it much faster. The girl didn't believe it at first and asked if they were sure that they could send her the finished file. Then Tony said he would send it through corporate mail. When Kimberly checked their document, she noted that everything looked quite good. She told the assistant manager that the new employees were quite good. Connor chuckled and then asked them if they smoked. Oliver raised his hand and said he was smoking. Then he called him to the roof and also asked if Tony wanted to join them. However, the guy thanked him for the invitation, but was forced to refuse. Soon after, Oliver and Connor went to the smoking room on the roof of the company's headquarters. Connor asked the man how his first day was going, but Oliver didn't understand yet. Connor said that he shouldn't worry because it's always difficult at first, but then he'll get used to it. Oliver really hoped so. Connor then asked him how well he knew Tony. Oliver said that he knew him quite well. He was the leader of the team, and Tony led the B team during the training period. Connor said that this guy, the leader of the top team that joined the strategic planning department, seemed to understand that he was the best of the best. He said Tony is incredible for many reasons. He was not a graduate of a prestigious university, but achieved everything with the help of a student loan bank. And here he is doing just fine. The only work experience in his life he acquired was physical labor, which is of no use in the office. Oliver couldn't believe that Tony had previously earned money through physical labor. Connor asked if he didn't know about it. Oliver said he had no idea because they only met him at the training center. He said that, judging by information from the HR department, Tony's situation was fundamentally different from Oliver's. He asked the guy to be kinder to his partner because he is older than him. Oliver smiled and replied that it was. Connor then headed back into the building, saying that he always enjoys making friends with his colleagues. He asked Oliver not to be careful with Tony just because they differ in places in the rankings. When Oliver realized that the elders here were so kind and caring, he smiled. Soon after this, evening came. Tony and Oliver were walking together after work. Then the guy asked the hero if the team doesn't organize a festive evening for newcomers. Tony replied that no one else does anything like that. Oliver then suggested they celebrate their first day of work. Tony asked him where he wanted to go. Oliver said he knew a place. Soon the men came to a small food stall. They sat down at the table, and Oliver asked the saleswoman to bring them fish pie soup and 2 bottles of soju. He poured the drink into Tony's glass and offered him a drink. Then he asked him where he came from. Tony said he came from Chunin. He also heard that Oliver was from Soko. The man said that they were both from provincial cities, and it wouldn't hurt for them to get to know each other better. He said that since they joined the company at the same time, they could talk to him the way he was comfortable and skip all the formalities. Tony smiled and agreed with this proposal. At that moment, a message came to his phone. Clyde was talking about how Tony pisses him off. The hero was surprised, not understanding why he was here and why he was annoying someone. Then he said that he didn't mean him. He reminded Tony that he had an infuriating namesake. He explained that today, their boss from the training center signed a contract with a client regarding insurance. However, Tony was standing next to her. He loomed over her, crossed his arms, and bulged his eyes. The client immediately became indignant, asking why this young man was looking at her like that. As it turned out, in the end, the client did not sign anything, and thus the company lost $200 million. Then Oliver asked Tony what was going on. The hero said that his friend wrote a couple of messages in the educational chat. Oliver was surprised that they had such a chat. Then Tony reminded him of the group he studied with at the training center. He said that they created a general chat, including everyone who came across the strategic planning department. He then asked if he remembered Tony and their teams, and a hint of anger immediately appeared on Oliver's face. He told him not to even start about him because this guy is just terrible. At this moment, the hero remembered the day when he encountered his namesake. He approached him and asked what did not suit him. In response to this, Tony only asked to leave him alone. Oliver then asked if Samantha was in the chat. Tony said it was there and asked why he was asking. Oliver's face turned red and he said that this girl was very beautiful and smart, and then asked to add him to the chat too. The hero said that he would ask the others about it and add it if they don't mind. Then Oliver stood up from his table and said that all the drinks would be at his expense. The next day, the men went back to work for the company. Kimberly said that at the very bottom of their company website, they would find videos that listed the criteria for personnel selection. And their task today was to check these videos. And next week they would be published. She asked them to think about what they should prepare and what needs to be checked. The men said that she could rely on them. At this moment, the phone did not ring again. When he picked up the phone, he saw that assistant manager Marvin was calling him, but the hero did not understand why he was calling him at such a time. He picked up the phone and greeted him in a whisper. Then Marvin shouted, saying that he had been causing problems for them since day one, and today he didn't even show up to the event without any warning. Then Tony said that he was at work now. Apparently Marvin called the wrong Tony. The man apologized for getting the numbers mixed up and then said that this guy was really getting on his nerves. Then he decided to ask his friend what department he currently works in. Tony said that he was currently in HR, and then Marvin said that they should call him a little later. The man was extremely unhappy that his employee was not answering the phone, so he decided to simply call his home number. Meanwhile, the story moves to the cottage of the director of the Elsung Group, Christopher. In the middle of the day, his phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone and asked who was calling him. It was Marvin, who wished the man good morning and said that he was an assistant manager at the company where Tony worked. Christopher asked why he was calling him. Marvin then explained that Tony didn't show up for work today, so he wanted to know if something had happened that caused him to not show up. Christopher said everything was calm between them, and then he asked if Tony really didn't show up for work. Marvin said he received a warning yesterday for his behavior, and today he was worried that might be the case. Christopher asked the man his name, then Marvin introduced himself again. The director said that he also did not know where he had gone, but said that he would try to get through to him and tell him to contact him. Marvin apologized to him for the trouble and thanked him for his help. Before Christopher hung up, he heard the manager's voice on the phone asking where Tony was, but Marvin said his family didn't know either. The man said that this guy needs to be fired urgently. He refuses to come to work just because he gave him a lecture on behavior for a broken contract for $200 million. As it turned out, Christopher heard the entire conversation. When he realized what had happened, he immediately swore at his grandson. The man's secretary asked if he had any problems. Then Christopher screamed, ordering the secretary to call the vice president of the company and tell him to drag his offspring by the scruff of the neck within the hour. The man decided to ask what was the reason for such a rush. Christopher then said that he didn't need a reason. The secretary should have just called them right away. 3 hours had passed since that moment. Work at the company was in full swing, but Tony was having difficulties. In front of him was a questionnaire in English. At that moment, Connor approached him and asked if there were any problems with his resume. Tony then awkwardly scratched his head, saying that his English skills weren't that great. Connor said that the level of English that was needed here was not so high, that basic English would be enough. Then Tony explained that his English was simply terrible. Connor asked how he scored on the exam. He hoped the answer would be around 800 or 900. However, Tony said that he only scored 500 because it did not take into account presentation skills and documents. Then Connor asked to send him this file, saying that he would sort out the resume himself, but warned Tony that he needed to improve his English if he wanted to continue working in the company. After work, they went to the store to buy English textbooks, but he didn't know which book to start with. Suddenly, he saw a book called English for Business and decided that this would be a good choice. This book cost 18,001. Soon evening came and the heroes returned to their apartment. He tried to learn English with the help of a book he had just bought. However, he was very bothered by the fact that everything he wrote down was very difficult to remember. He has no problem understanding politics, economics, and news, but struggles with language, perhaps because he is only good at memorizing. Then the system invited him to use a store of exclusive goods. Among them was a package for beginners in learning Arabic, Portuguese, Korean craftsmanship, and perfumery. The system also reported that there were 7 days left before the store update. Then Tony thought that perhaps the English skill would appear here later, but he did not understand how he could collect enough points. The system suggested that he take advantage of the available mini-quests, but the hero was very tired and decided to think about it after a good sleep. The next day, he returned to the company's headquarters. Kimberly's work was in full swing. Tony blinked then, deciding to activate his skill. He had to look at a person or object for more than 10 seconds, and then the mini-quest he needed would appear. At that moment, a system appeared above Kimberly's head. She reported that recently the employee's computer had been periodically displaying a blue screen, so Tony needed to ask permission and fix her software. Then the hero turned to the girl, saying that he had heard that for the last couple of days, her computer had often been freezing. The girl asked why he suddenly started talking about it. Tony didn't say that he assumed it was because of the updates, so he asked her to let him look at her computer since his computer had behaved the same way before. The girl allowed him since she would still need to leave for the morning report. Tony said she could rely on him. He soon began updating her computer, which was almost complete. He then went to Connor, saying that he heard that he decided to quit smoking, so he brought him candy to make it easier for him to cope with it. The man asked him how he knew that he was quitting, since he decided to do it just today. The hero grinned, saying that the bird whispered to him, and then wished the manager good luck. Connor thanked him for the candy and words of encouragement. After this, the system informed him that the mini quest had been completed. Now, Tony had 4 points. Then the guy asked if there were any additional quests. He turned his head to the side, hoping to see the system window there. Then he turned his head the other way. However, when he realized that there were no more quests left, he became quite upset. At that moment, a man entered the office. It was the general manager of the Human Resources Department, Jordan. He asked if anything big had happened during his absence. Connor said that everything was stable with them, and then they asked how his vacation went. However, Jordan paid attention to the new guys and asked who these guys were. Tony immediately approached him and greeted the man, saying that he was a new employee and would try his best. After that, Oliver greeted him. Jordan was surprised because he initially applied to the Strategic Planning Department, and this upset him a little, since none of the new employees purposefully went to the HR department. Connor then said that they didn't hire anyone on purpose so that they could select someone from the pictures for strategic planning. Jordan said that if you think about it that way, they never had new employees immediately after training camp. It felt like it was just yesterday that Connor and Kimberly had decided to stay in their department. Even though they were applying for planning, time flew by very quickly. After the end of the period of working in the HR department under the planning department program, if the men find that they like it better here, then they should let Jordan know, because the Human Resource Management Department may be better than the planning department. Oliver couldn't believe his ears. Could he really stay here instead of going to strategic planning? Jordan added that this is not a place where they can stay by simply wishing to do so. Everything will depend on their work performance. Meanwhile, the story is again transferred to the house of Director Christopher. Even from the street, he could be heard screaming that he asked the men to come to him half an hour ago. He asked Tony why it took him so long and why he didn't show up for work. The guy said he was late at a friend's birthday party and asked his grandfather for forgiveness. Christopher asked if he really called that an excuse. Then Tony bowed again, asking his grandfather for forgiveness. Then Christopher took his phone and started calling someone. As it turned out, he called the HR department. Tony answered the phone and asked how he could help. Christopher introduced himself, saying that he was the chairman. At first, Tony couldn't believe that the chairman of the Elsung group was actually calling him. Kimberly and Jordan were also very surprised. Christopher then asked to transfer Tony to the company's construction department. Then the hero said that he was currently in the personnel department and clarified whether the chairman really wanted to transfer him to another department. Then Christopher clarified that he meant his grandson and once again asked to transfer him to construction work. The hero said that he would definitely do so, and before he could ask if the chairman needed anything else, the man hung up. Jordan asked him if the chairman actually called him. Hero said that the chairman wants him to transfer Tony from life insurance to the construction department. Jordan asked him why it happened so suddenly and why he called him personally. Kimberly said that Tony is the chairman's grandson. Jordan couldn't believe his ears. He didn't fully believe that they were talking about the SSS codename. Then they finally realized that the guy from the training center was the director's grandson. Meanwhile, Tony fell to his knees, begging his grandfather to forgive him. Christopher said that there was no need to apologize to him. He would transfer his grandson to a foreign branch anyway. He would work on a construction site in the Middle East for a year. Perhaps the heat of the desert would help him come to his senses. Tony couldn't believe that his grandfather was actually moving him to the desert. Then he said that he would definitely correct himself and would not make such a mistake again. They just needed to forget about everything this time. He fell at his grandfather's feet, begging him to leave him here. He said that he didn't like sand at all. Then Christopher kicked him, calling him a poor fool. The blow was strong enough that Tony was thrown to the floor. At that moment, the secretary approached him and helped him up. Christopher said that he did not help him because his grandson did not deserve help. The secretary had no choice but to fix it. He then left the room with Christopher. He asked the man to inform managers that they were working without lunch breaks due to the delay. Tony was left sitting alone in the room. When everyone left, he suddenly began to cry. Soon the next day arrived, and the heroes again went to work with the HR team. He said they had received annual leave application forms this month and asked Kimberly to let him distribute them as he had nothing better to do. The girl said that if he wants to do this, then she will only be glad. Thus, the hero got to work. The girl noted to herself that Tony is a person who looks for and completes tasks on his own. Then she noticed that Oliver had gone out for a smoke break again, apparently something he was doing more often than not. At this point, Tony noticed an error in the paperwork. He called someone and said that there was an error on the form, so he wanted to ask permission to correct it. His interlocutor thanked the young man for his attentiveness. At that moment, a man in a suit and glasses entered the office. Tony immediately stood up from his seat, greeting the man and asking how he could help him. The man said he was Donald from the university's career support team. He had come to discuss a business partnership and asked where he could find Connor's manager. Tony said that he had gone out for a while but would be back soon, and invited the man to wait for him on the sofa for a while. Donald sat down on the sofa and began reading something on his phone. Kimberly was worried about the manager not returning and keeping the customer waiting. Tony noticed this too, so he made Donald a cup of coffee and said that they had alerted the manager and he would be there in 10 minutes. Donald thanked him for his vigilance and for the coffee. Kimberly exhaled, glad that Tony was there. Otherwise, she would have had to do all the work. Shortly after, Oliver entered the room. He sprayed his clothes, hoping that this would get rid of the smell of tobacco. Kimberly noted to herself that he did not put much effort into his work. Shortly after him, Connor entered the room and greeted Donald, saying that he shouldn't have come in person, but thanked him for coming all the way. Donald said that Connor was a contractor and he was a subcontractor, so he couldn't help but come. He asked the man when the university's employment information session would take place. Connor said he thought it would be a good idea to schedule this meeting over the holidays. The active hiring starts in the second half of the year, around August, so they need to move things along quickly. Donald said that students should always think about their career, but it is up to them whether they become employees of this company or not. Before leaving, he apologized for putting them off work and said that they should talk outside, but before that, he would go to the restroom. Connor said he would be waiting for him. Before leaving the office, he called out to Tony. He thanked the guy for someone notifying him of the client's arrival, since he had completely forgotten that he had an appointment today. Tony said he was the one who should have thanked him. Soon after this, he resumed his work. At that moment, someone called into the office. Kimberly answered the phone and said that she heard that the part that the boss had designated was not mentioned. Then Tony realized that he should take this call. He picked up his phone and joined the conversation. He introduced himself and said that he was currently replacing Connor. As it turned out, Christopher called. He asked to urgently send the person to his office. Tony said that the request would be fulfilled immediately. Then Kimberly asked him who it was. Tony said that the chairman asked to come up to him. Apparently, he was going to call Connor, but since he was busy right now, he should have gone there. Kimberly then asked who answered the phone. Tony said it was him. The girl said that in that case, it was worth listening to him. After that, Tony went to the elevator. This was his first call from the chairman, and he was a little nervous. Soon he arrived at the desired floor, where he was met by the girl at the reception. She asked how she could help him, and Tony said that he had come from the HR department on a call from the chairman. The girl called the chairman, asking if he called the man, and touched the personnel, and then Christopher told her to let him in. After that, the girl smiled and said that Tony could come in. When the hero entered the office, he saw that his namesake was kneeling in front of Christopher, and he was shouting at him, saying that he would definitely go abroad. Tony begged for forgiveness this time. Then the hero attracted attention by saying that the chairman had called him. His namesake, kneeling, did not understand what was happening. The hero didn't really like the atmosphere in this room. Then Christopher told Tony to go with his grandson to the airport and buy him a plane ticket, personally put him on a flight to the Middle East, and let him return only when he had gained decent work experience. Tony pleaded with his grandfather again, begging him to forgive him. Then his father intervened in the conversation, saying that Tony was the grandson of the chairman, and he should pardon him. Christopher then wondered if he should really forgive him again. Pictures from the past, from 1970, flashed before his eyes again. The woman stood on the pier and screamed the boy's name, and tears flowed from her eyes. Soon a man approached her, and then the woman said that she could not find him. The man tried to calm her down and told her not to worry, because they would definitely find him. As it turned out, their child, aged 5, disappeared. And the woman said that she wanted to die because she saw no point in living without her son. After this, the story moves to the orphanage 2 years later. As it turned out, the couple could not find their child, and they decided to adopt another baby. They promised that they would take good care of him and raise him like their own child. Then Christopher thought that trouble had been following this man since his very appearance, and he was already simply furious. Then he turned to Tony, and both guys thought that the chairman was addressing them. He said Tony might be moving back to his place because of HR. The hero said that he understood him and left the office. Christopher then turned to his grandson. He said that the guy who just left was the first in the top. Then he asked his grandson what he thinks about when he sees him. However, Tony only lowered his head, not knowing what to answer. Christopher said that this guy shows that he puts a lot of effort into his work so that no one has to envy him. He achieves amazing heights. He probably works so hard that he only sleeps a couple of hours a day. He said that this guy was the captain of the team, and his grandson was just a cheerleader. Then he asked where he was in the top. Tony's father immediately scrunched his face when he heard this question. Christopher said that he was in last place, and yet he would have to inherit this company, and he doesn't even show up for work. Then Tony said that he realized his mistake and asked to give him another chance. He promised that he would work as hard as he could. Tony's father apologized to the chairman, saying that he would raise him better and try to make sure he didn't make any more mistakes. He addressed him as his only son, said that Tony was his only grandson, so he should be lenient. Christopher thought about his words. Then he said that he was giving him one last chance. Tony immediately became happy and thanked his grandfather for the chance. Christopher said that he gives the chance, but not his company. Tony made a big mistake here, so he needs to find a job somewhere else. Meanwhile, the story moves back to the HR department. To the surprise of everyone present, Tony, the chairman's grandson, entered the office. The hero asked what brought him here. He said that Mr. Chairman asked to be transferred to another division, so he came here to have Tony transfer him to Seoul. The next day, Samantha informed the hero that Tony, the grandson of the chairman, had transferred to their department. The hero was not very happy that they were laughing at his name again. Then he asked the girl what this guy had done this time. She said that an elderly couple came to their store and changed the channel for 30 minutes. It all looked like they were going to watch a movie. Then Tony approached the couple and told them to get out of here if they weren't going to buy anything. After that, they went to the information desk and complained about him. They said that the new workers have no manners at all, because of which Samantha and the entire workforce were called to gather together. Apparently, she would be scolded and lamented about how you can't be rude to customers. Tony couldn't believe that this guy was causing trouble again from his first day in the new department. After some time, he did something again in the middle of the conference. He said that he would go to the toilet for a while, but as it turned out, he never returned. Everyone was amazed at his behavior. Soon Saturday arrived, the story moves to the church. As it turned out, Hannah nevertheless accepted Hank's proposal, and they decided to get married. They invited Tony to their wedding. The young man noted that his mother was wearing a wig. Then the woman asked if she really looked too strange in it. Tony said that it just looked unusual, and she herself looked very beautiful, and he would always support her, and he also hoped that she would find happiness with Hank. Soon the wedding ceremony began in the church, and the pastor appeared to tie the knot. He wished that their love would grow and their relationship would develop favorably. Tony noted that it was a single-guest wedding, but that's what his mom and Hank wanted. Hank vowed to give his all to the marriage, just like when he confessed feelings he had been holding for a long time. Hannah agreed to give all her love to her husband, because heaven does not often give a second chance to find your person. Then the pastor said that they should end the ceremony with a kiss. Afterwards, Hannah and Hank kissed. After some time, they appeared in the pastor's office. The man congratulated them, grinned, and said that he thought that Hank would remain a loner. Hank thanked him for taking the time to make the ceremony official, and said that they now owe him one. The man said that this was nothing, because it was time for him to retire soon anyway. Then Hank grinned, saying that there are a lot of people who rely on him. However, the pastor said he did not think the priest would approve of a second marriage being secured by a mediocre man like him. Hannah objected, saying that the man was her benefactor too. The pastor chuckled, saying that he was not such a benefactor, but he thanked the woman for her nice words and then asked what they were going to do now. The couple said they wanted to go to the cemetery where Hannah's ex-husband, Howard, is buried. The pastor was quite surprised by this answer. Hank said they should stop by and see him before going anywhere. The pastor sighed, not understanding how a person who was supposed to outlive them all could leave this world so early. Soon, Hannah, Hank, and Tony went to the cemetery, then told the guy that long before his father met his mother, he paid for his education at medical school. Hannah was surprised to hear this fact. Then Hank said that they had to leave the orphanage at the age of 20. They only had money in their pockets for the first months from the state, and medical school was expensive. So Howard helped him a lot with the payment then. Hank was surprised that he never told them about this. Hannah said he always said they were just good friends and nothing more. Then Tony wondered how his father was doing now. Soon they arrived at the cemetery. Hank knelt near Howard's grave and said that he married Hannah. He said that it seemed like heaven itself was wishing them a happy life. But the doctor said that Hannah was completely cured of cancer, and now Howard would have to support their new life. Hannah cried, saying that even before he died, he asked her to continue to live happily, and she will fulfill it. She will raise Tony and take care of him as she should. She will try to enjoy every day, if only he will support them. Tony thought to himself that he would do everything possible to make his dad proud of his son, and then thanked him for everything. Now later, the hero said that it was time for him to go. His mother asked him to stay and have dinner together before he left. However, Tony said that they needed to prepare for their honeymoon, and he would only get in the way. He said goodbye to his mother and Hank and asked them to take care of themselves. On Monday morning, he returned to work at the company. He brought a spare amplifier just in case. Connor met him in the parking lot and asked if he was ready. Tony said he loaded up the mic amplifier and 3 knobs. Connor said he shouldn't smile so much, An information conference about work and employment might seem like fun, especially since it would be his first event. But they had a busy schedule. They would need to hold it at several universities, and then they would see if he could. At the end of the day, Tony also smiled. Soon they arrived at Siawan University. Tony tried to adjust the microphone. He asked Oliver, who was helping him, if he could be heard. Oliver said that he could be heard perfectly. Tony then asked him to go to the other side and check the sound there. He suspected that he might be phoning. Oliver came to the other side, but he did not understand what it meant to foul. He then said in surprise that he heard Tony's voice twice. The hero said that this is what the word phone it means. Then he said that he needed to adjust something on the amplifiers and asked to wait a second because he needed to check the volume settings. Oliver chuckled, saying that there was nothing Tony couldn't do. While the hero was adjusting the equalizer, he thought about the fact that past experience is always useful. Then he decided to test the microphone again. He asked Oliver if the sound was better. Oliver said there is now no extraneous noise. Then the hero said that in that case he could go down. At that moment, Connor entered the hall and asked if everything was ready. Tony said they had everything set up, from the computer, video files, sound systems, microphones, to the entrance and exit arrangements, so the conference could begin. Connor smiled, saying it was quite impressive work. Soon the students arrived at the conference. Connor greeted them, saying that today there would be an information conference on employment at the Elsung Group. He said that this was their second visit to their university. The last one was a year ago, and he had already seen familiar faces here. Kimberly asked those who were here last year to raise their hands. One of those who raised their hands was a student wearing glasses and a green t-shirt. Then, the girl said that she remembered him and asked if he wanted to join the company in the first half of the year. The guy didn't say that he applied but didn't pass the test this year during the recruiting period. He wants to apply again. The girl said that the documents can be difficult the first time, but she wished him good luck next time. Then Connor said that if they didn't pass the paper stage, then someone must have passed them in terms of additional skills scores. Starting this year, the English proficiency test task will not be mandatory. These results will be accepted as additional skills, and bonus points are awarded for the test so that everything is fair. Work experience, even if in no way related to their field, will also be an advantage. Therefore, it is important to keep track of some points that will help with recruiting a sufficient number of analogs. Then the guy realized that he had failed precisely for this reason. He needed to use at least some additional achievements. Oliver said the seniors are quite experienced and work really well as a team. When the conference was over, Connor said it was time for them to pick up their equipment and head back to the company. After that, the four of them went back to the office. He said that the manager wants to entrust the conference to newcomers this week. Kimberly was surprised. She thought it was too early to give them such work. Connor said it looked like the manager wanted to test them in the conference room before moving forward. The results would certainly influence the estimate that would go to the strategic planning department. Tony then said that he would prepare everything for tomorrow, and Oliver said that he would do the same. However, he was surprised that this test overtook them so suddenly. The next day, Tony went to the HR conference room. Jordan asked who wanted to perform first. Then Connor said that Tony is younger than Oliver, so they should start with the younger ones. The hero was surprised, no matter how you look at it. Being the first does not give him any advantages. Then Oliver raised his hand, saying that he would like to begin. Tony was surprised by his initiative. At first, he thought he heard something. As it turned out, shortly before this, Connor said that he would make Tony speak first so that Oliver could be better prepared. He said that in this case, the second one will have an advantage. He cannot miss the person who took out a student loan, because there are places where some are simply not meant to be. Oliver remained silent. He did not know what to answer. As it turned out, Tony was eavesdropping on their conversation. Then Jordan said that they have an established order and the older ones need to give way, so Oliver will now perform. Oliver said that 300 people will be hired in the second half of the year to pass the document check first. Of course, you need to prepare a resume. Then there are additional points. Kimberly noted that his presentation was off to a good start and his breathing was stable. However, the presentation was a bit boring. Nothing catches your attention, and his voice sounds quite monotone. Apparently, Jordan noticed this too. He stopped Oliver, saying that was enough, and then said that it was Tony's turn. The heroes stood up from their seats and introduced themselves. He said that before they get down to the main thing, he would like to pretend that those present in the office were students of the university they would visit next time. Jordan noted to himself that he was off to a pretty good start. Tony then turned to the chart, saying that their company was at the top of the ranking for a reason. He said that no other company can compare with their performance because they are, without exaggeration, the best in Korea. He then asked them to raise their hands if they were truly interested in applying for a job with the Elsung Group. Kimberly raised her hand, saying she was interested. Then Tony turned to Oliver, saying that he should already give out the gifts that the company had prepared for the students. They wanted to give them to all the conference participants. Oliver looked surprised, asking if he really wanted him to do it right now. Jordan noted that this is a rather entertaining way of presenting. Then Tony decided to tell them why they should choose their company. He said that in order to keep up with the era of globalization, the company is focused on 6 main projects. First, their electronics technology branch is in the process of developing a new growth engine using OLED panels. Kimberly noted that he does a very good job. His speech makes people want to apply, showing the future prospects of the company. Connor also highlighted his action-packed voice, which is fact-focused, and he also worked on the visuals of the slides. Jordan thought this guy was great. He was doing even better than assistant Connor and Kimberly. Then Connor suddenly stopped him, clarifying that Tony did not speak English that well. He then said that you can imagine that he is a foreigner and asks him something in English. Then he asked what Tony would do in such a situation. The hero was not at a loss and again turned to Oliver for help. Oliver was surprised that they wanted to force him to do something again. He then asked him to approach Mr. Connor and explain the hiring details to him in English. Jordan was extremely pleased with this method of solving the problem. Kimberly laughed, noting how cleverly he got out of the situation. Then Connor thought that the winner apparently had already been determined. Tony approached the manager, asking if he should continue. Then Jordan said that was enough for today and thanked the guy for his excellent job. Soon, the university hosted another information conference on employment in the Elsung Group company. This time Tony spoke. He asked the students to take seats closer to him, since the conference would start in 5 minutes. Connor noted that a lot of people had gathered today. Donald said that the Elsung Group company is one of the largest companies in Korea, and of course people are interested in hearing about it. When the conference began, Tony introduced himself, saying that he worked in the Human Resources Department and would be the presenter for this conference today. Donald was pleasantly surprised that this guy was in charge of the conference today. Then Connor explained that this was a new employee in their company. Donald said he seemed like a professional, so he wasn't surprised he was so kind and respectful that day. Connor said that this is not entirely true, because Tony did not graduate from a prestigious university, and his knowledge of English is quite poor. He suggested that working in the company was not for him. However, Donald did not agree with him. He said that now the prestige of the university is not valued as highly as it was before. Rather, competent people can be seen by how they are respected and recognized at that age. Tony then decided to start the conference by asking the students if anyone knew the 3 qualities the company was looking for in new employees. However, the students did not know the answer to this question. Then Tony said that these qualities are passion, ethics, and innovative thinking. Their company is looking for people who will get to work with sparkling eyes. They are waiting for those who do not limit themselves to the beliefs of the past, but can move the company into an innovative future. However, in the process of working with everything, you should not give up your values and principles, since these qualities apply to each of those present. Then one of the students raised his hand, intending to ask a question. Tony immediately gave him the opportunity to speak. The guy said that he had heard that rural university graduates who applied for the company did not pass the document check. He wanted to know if this was true, and if it was not, then he wanted to know what the conditions for hiring were. Tony didn't know how to answer this question since it was the first time he had heard about it. And as for the process of hiring new employees, it is a blind test that does not take into account the focus of the university. He said that he studied through the bank's academic loan system, and he was hired anyway. Hearing this, the students were happy. They decided that in this case, they should also try to apply. Then another student decided to speak up. He said that he had been applying to the company for 3 years. Despite the fact that he had already graduated, he never passed the paper check. He asked if they were really hiring blindly, and how would they know that they are not lying? Oliver replied that this guy was quite rude. Then Tony said that this was true. And since this guy had been working for the company for 3 years, then we can assume that he was older than Tony himself. The hero said that at the age of 20, he began working at a construction site as a carpenter. He said any work experience is important. It can be anything that demonstrates the person has the qualities the company is looking for in an employee. The student then said that he was preparing for employment, so he got a license. Tony said that in this case, his time would be worthwhile. The document checks focus on the applicant's previous lives as described in the resume, and every second, one has a license. Then the student asked what he should prepare in this case. Tony said that he needs to prepare a resume where he describes his lifestyle and the experiences he went through as well as his personality, and the company will look at every detail of the resume. He said now is the time to question how to show your strength to qualify. Then the student realized why he was rejected. Each time he decided that he should revise his resume and add a few points to it. Donald noted that the guy gave the right advice because a resume is the first thing they look at during selection. Connor agreed with him, saying that it described the candidate's entire life. He remembered a situation that happened 4 months ago. Then he approached Kimberly and asked why she put some forms aside. The girl said that these forms contained information about Tony, codename SSS, which means the name of the son of the vice president. Connor thought that this was probably why his resume was very interesting. It described how he got into the setting, worked there, described his values and beliefs. It all looked pretty decent. The girl said that on the other hand, the resume of that guy from abroad was simply terrible. There were monosyllabic sentences without any sincerity. Connor said that this must be the same SSS. He saw the vice president raising his son in modest conditions. Then he remembered a situation that happened 2 months ago. Connor asked the girl if the son of the vice president was not in first place. Kimberly said that it wasn't him. He was in last place in the top, and the one who wrote a good resume came in first. Connor at first didn't believe that the guy with credit training made it to the first place, but the girl suggested that he had a lot of work experience, despite the fact that his education was not the best. Now Connor assumed that his opinion had changed to some extent. Donald asked him what he meant. Meanwhile, Tony continued the conference. He said that they accept workers with experience. This will make it even easier to join the company, so they should not think of the newcomer program as just one option. He said that there was little time left, so students needed to make good use of it. One of the students said he would think of this as his last chance and would consider other companies too. Tony grinned and said that other companies should not talk so openly, but he would pretend that he had never heard it. The guy awkwardly apologized for his words. Connor said that Tony was very competent and pleasant to talk to. Because of his education, he was biased towards him. Then Donald laughed, saying that he still had a lot to learn, because education is not an indicator of the whole personality. Connor agreed with him, saying that after all, his life had just begun. After the conference, Oliver approached his partner, asking how he was feeling, because the guy turned out to be quite rude, but the hero said that he was fine, he was just tired. He said that he understood this guy. He said that he tried himself in the company for 3 whole years, and if Tony were in his place, his reaction to such words would be identical. Oliver said he wasn't that kind of guy, but Tony said he was actually desperate for the job. He did physical labor, which was very difficult, plus his mother was sick. At that moment, Connor entered the hall. He asked if they were done with the conference. Then Tony said that they had everything for today, and they should head to the next place. Once everyone was outside, they said goodbye to Donald, and the man said that they should keep up the good work since they had done a great job. As they got into the car, Donald waved after them. He wondered to himself that Connor was, in fact, still a child. A few days after this, Jordan was sorting out the papers. He consulted with the assistant manager who should give the evaluation points. Tony or Oliver, he could not decide, since his opinion was quite relative. Connor said that it all depends on the manager himself. Then Jordan asked if he really recommended Oliver because he studied abroad. Then Connor said that he should give Tony a full score because he was better. Jordan said he's a very competent worker, but his education is not impressive. Connor then said that they were living in a time where it wasn't that important. He was smart and capable, and they should support him in this. Jordan agreed with him, saying he felt the same way. 2 weeks have passed since then. One workday, Oliver approached Tony and asked what he was looking at. At this time, the hero entered his data somewhere. He said that he was going to check something. He was interested in the results of his English proficiency test. Oliver asked age or number of points from last time. Tony said he scored 705 points. He studied the material for a month and only managed to score 180 additional points, and this result was very frustrating for him. However, Oliver was shocked. He did not understand how a person could improve his results so much in just 1 month. At that moment, Connor entered the office. Noticing the strange expression on Tony's face, he asked what happened. Oliver then said that Tony scored 705 in English and was unhappy that his results had risen by 180 points in a month. Connor chuckled, saying that it looked like his limited knowledge of English wouldn't be a problem anymore. Tony said he's still not good enough, but he'll try to work harder. Then Connor approached him, asking him to stay in their HR department. However, he did not say that his goal was to enter the strategic planning department. Connor said that they were thinking about taking on another person to join their team, and the boss recommended him, and he agreed with him. Oliver is surprised to hear that there is an opening in HR and he offers it to Tony. Connor said that he couldn't say that the HR department is better than the strategic planning department, but they move up the career ladder faster than employees in other departments. Sometimes they are called to talk with the head of the company. This helps them keep track of work superiors. However, Tony apologized, saying that he wanted to give priority to the strategic planning department, even if it meant losing his position in the HR department. Connor said he was sorry to hear that, but he didn't want to pressure him into making this decision and asked if he was sure the point was that he wouldn't regret this decision later. Tony thanked the man for the offer, but he knew he couldn't accept it. Connor said it was okay, and if he didn't want to stay, there was nothing he could do about it. Oliver was a little upset that Connor didn't offer him the position. Connor then returned to Jordan and informed him that Tony had rejected his offer. Jordan was surprised that he refused, despite his words that he would hire him. He said that he had made the proposal twice, but Tony was adamant about moving to the strategic planning department. Jordan said that they seemed to be the only ones who treated him with attention. He didn't understand how a person with no knowledge of English could be so eager to plan. Then he asked Connor if he turned him down before or after he found out that you must score at least 700 points in the business English exam. Connor sighed tiredly and said that he had already received 705 points this month, so he didn't think they would be able to convince him. That evening, HR decided to organize a team dinner. Jordan praised all of his workers, saying they did a great job. He then turned to Tony, saying that he was very lucky since he offered him to stay in the department, but then reluctantly gave him 5 points and let him go free. Tony said he was sorry, but in the strategic planning department, he would be able to take full advantage of the skills he had acquired here. The manager then approached Oliver, asking if he would be upset about being rated lower than Tony. Oliver said he's not upset. He knows he's not that good compared to him, so it's okay. Jordan said the score will not affect the overall performance rating. They are simply tracking the development process of the strategic planning department's candidates. However, Oliver didn't understand what he meant. Kimberly explained that the manager was asking if he wanted to stay in HR because they wanted to know if Oliver was willing to take the position that Tony turned down. At first, Oliver couldn't believe his ears. Tony thought to himself that this was a great decision since Oliver was eager to stay here. Jordan said that since Oliver was drunk right now, they would continue the discussion tomorrow. He said that people could go and stay if they wanted. The main thing was to work hard wherever they were. He then decided to toast it and let go of all his worries. When the evening ended, Tony and Oliver went home together, Oliver inviting his partner to have another glass. However, Tony insisted that he was drunk and should not drink anymore. And despite all Oliver's requests, he did not cave in and refused to drink with him again. Soon after, they decided to sit down and rest on a bench. Then Oliver said that he had something to tell him. Tony suggested that they talk to him tomorrow since Oliver was too drunk. However, Oliver ignored him, saying that sometimes he felt inferior compared to Tony. The hero asked why he felt this way, because he studied abroad, and he had much better qualifications. Oliver then said that there was no point in this, because he still got all the glory, and he doubted that at this rate he would reach the planning department. Then Tony suggested that they go home, since Oliver could barely speak. Oliver said that he would remain in HR and would be promoted faster than Tony, but the hero did not understand what he meant by this. He asked Tony to give it his all so that he wouldn't have to swallow the dust that he would throw at him. Since they joined at the same time, they would never stop competing, and it would be so until he left this company. Hearing this, the hero smiled. He said that Oliver can do his best, and he too will give his best wherever he goes. And then they will meet at the top of the business. They will try to rise to assistant managers and then directors, and then even executive directors. Oliver promised that he would never lose to him. Tony promised him the same. A few days later, Tony was invited to a conference in the strategic planning department room. Albert asked if all the candidates who applied to join came here. All 4 people said everyone was in place. Albert said that he heard that Oliver decided to stay in the HR department, so another employee is joining them today, and the others should greet him warmly. Hearing this, Tony was very surprised. At that moment, the office door opened and a young man walked inside. As it turned out, it was Tony, the president's grandson, who waved and greeted everyone present.